Most people are familiar with the FBI's most wanted list, faces on posters, public tips, and nationwide manhunts. But today, we're getting into a different list, a list most people never see, because the CIA doesn't have a most wanted list. They keep a targets captured list. No bounties, no press, no warnings, just silent pursuit until the target is either captured or eliminated. If the CIA targets you, it's not a question of if, only when they'll take you out. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel's goal is 1 million subscribers. And without further ado, let's get into the CIA's Most Wanted Explained. And before we begin, a quick note: the CIA doesn't maintain a public most wanted list, and anything current is classified. So in this video, we'll be covering individuals whose cases have been declassified, targets who have already been captured, exposed, or neutralized. And these are the men the CIA eventually let the world see. Rafael Caro Quintero. Rafael Caro Quintero, or Rafa for short, was a Mexican drug trafficker in the 70s and 80s. He was long described as the co-founder of the Guadalajara cartel and as one of the godfathers of the modern Mexican drug trade. Let's call it the G cartel for short, considering just how hard the name is to say over and over again. The G cartel was one of the first ever cartels to traffic booger sugar and cannabis into the US in the late 70s. But having a big cartel and title like the Godfather isn't enough for the CIA to come after you. You'd barely be a speck on their radar. The DEA, on the other hand, would be very interested in talking to you, but that's where it all went south. Rafa was born on the 24th of October 1952 in La Noria, a tiny village buried in a region full of major drug traffickers. He was the oldest of 12 children. His father was a farmer that died when Rafa was just 14 years old. He worked with his mother to take care of his family, becoming the next head of the house. 2 years later, he left the village and settled down in Cabaraca, a bigger town, where he became a rancher. Through all this time, he claimed his highest level of education was the first year of primary school. He worked as a rancher for another 2 years before he met Pedro Aviles Perez at 18. At this time, he had been working as a truck driver for a while, as well as other odd jobs such as working in a bean and corn plantation, anything to make ends meet. Pedro was a Mexican drug trafficker that taught him the art of planting marijuana, and so Rafa used some of his family's land to do so. But eventually, he left his home state altogether to join the drug trade in Chihuahua. Caro grew more and more marijuana on his brother's ranch, before earning enough to buy several other ranches in the surrounding areas, becoming richer, as well as becoming a lot more powerful. Soon enough, he formed the G cartel, with a few others in the late 70s. This cartel pioneered the drug trade. It was the first to do it, before almost anyone else on such a large scale. He began trafficking drugs into the US, and in only a few years was being described in Mexican media as one of the narco de narcos. He expanded the cartel even further, building the huge Rancho Buffalo weed plantation in Chihuahua, estimated to be around 1,000 hectares, roughly the size of an entire small town. This massive plantation would be used to produce billions of dollars worth of marijuana. It wasn't very long-lived though. On November 14th, 1984, over 450 Mexican soldiers raided the ranch. They were acting on DEA intelligence and were armed, had helicopters, and successfully achieved their objective of seizing and burning the G cartel's product, wiping out 4,000 to 5,000 metric tons of marijuana. That's the same weight as around 1,000 fully grown elephants. This was marijuana worth several $billion. That's back in the early 80s. That'd be worth around $10 billion now. Rafa was angry. His beautiful ranch and marijuana all burnt to the ground. He wasn't just going to sit there and take it, and so he made possibly the worst decision that secured his fate. Remember how I said that simply being a drug lord isn't enough to get yourself on the CIA's radar? Well, Rafa's following actions was more than enough for the CIA to step in. He retaliated against the DEA, by abducting undercover DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in broad daylight. If there's one thing governmental agencies hate more than drug lords, it's public humiliation. Another DEA agent was abducted on the same day, a pilot, Alfredo Zavala Avalar, who was flying reconnaissance. This all took place on the afternoon of February 7th, 1985. The abducted agents were taken to the heart of the cartel city of Guadalajara, the house proudly owned by Rafael Caro Quintero. The agents were tortured for an agonizing 30 whole hours before being murdered. Their bodies were found a month later, on March 5th, wrapped in plastic, buried in a shallow grave. And this launched the DEA's largest homicide investigation to date, Operation Leyenda. He was eventually arrested for the first of many times on April 4th, 1985. But how? Well, the DEA wasn't working alone. As it turns out, the CIA had kept tabs on Rafa for a while, but right after the kidnapping, they went all out. They gathered as much information on Rafa as possible to capture and arrest him, information the DEA would have never been able to get on their own. Once he'd been arrested, the CIA never took him off their radar. A year later, on January 12, 1986, they made a surprise, forceful search on Rafa's prison. They seized electrical appliances, jewels, and money, which added up to over 300 million pesos, worth almost 50 million US dollars today. The authorities blamed the guards for the corruption, and the guards blamed the authorities. He was extradited to Mexico on charges of murdering a DEA agent and sentenced to 199 years in prison for his crimes. The USA still has him listed as a wanted fugitive, waiting for their chance to put him on trial and sentence him their way. He was transferred from prison to prison, all while continuing to run his criminal enterprise from behind bars. He created money laundering fronts with gas stations, construction companies, shoe factories, restaurants, real estate, and much, much more. He was tossed around justice systems, and finally, on February 27, 2025, the Mexican government sent him to the United States of America so that they could finally have their day in court. The CIA, DEA, and DOJ will all be prosecuting Rafael Caro Quintero for his crimes. Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri. Abd al-Nahim Hussein Muhammad Abdul al-Nashiri, well, that's a mouthful, was born on January 5th, 1965 at Mecca. He is one of the most notorious individuals out there, being accused for the bombing of the USS Cole and other maritime attacks. He's also suspected of heading al-Qaeda operations in the Persian Gulf region, but in his case, the CIA's treatment of him is also criminal in nature. Although he was born in 1965, it was only when he was in his late 20s that he started taking action. He moved to Afghanistan in the early 90s to participate in attacks against the Russians in the region, with the USA supporting the Mujahideen's actions at the time. In 1996, he ended up meeting Osama bin Laden for the first time. It was here that bin Laden tried convincing him to join al-Qaeda, but al-Nashiri refused because, as it turned out, he found the idea of swearing a loyalty oath to bin Laden as distasteful. He then traveled to his home in Yemen, where he first started getting the ideas for his first operation. These ideas came to shape after he started noticing many US and other foreign ships along the southwest coast of Yemen. He went back to Afghanistan a year later, and this is when he started to take serious action. Nashiri met bin Laden again, but declined to join his group still, instead fighting with the Taliban against the Afghan Northern Alliance, and assisted in the smuggling of 4 anti-tank missiles into Saudi Arabia. He also arranged for to get a Yemeni passport. His cousin was subsequently identified to be one of the escort bombers in the 1998 US Embassy bombings in Kenya. It was the same year that Nashiri finally joined al-Qaeda, reporting directly to bin Laden. It was nearing the end of the year, 1998. Nashiri planned to attack a US vessel with a boat full of explosives, and bin Laden personally approved of this plan, completely funding it. Nashiri first tried to attack the USS The Civilians as a part of the infamous 2000 Millennium attack plots, but the boat he used for this was way overloaded with explosives and started sinking. His next plan, however, was successful. The USS Cole bombing killed 17 US sailors, injuring several others. He rose up the ranks in Al-Qaeda, becoming the chief of operations for the Arabian Peninsula. He organized the Limburg tanker bombing in 2002, a French ship off the coast of Yemen, and has been part of several other attacks. And the CIA had enough. In November 2002, he was captured in Dubai by the CIA, more notably their SAD or Special Activities Division. Once al-Nashri was captured, the CIA used various means of torture to get a confession out of him, specifically waterboarding him. All other forms of torture were redacted from the public record. During his trial, in Nashri's opening statements, he said all the confessions were false, including the French vessel Limburg incident, the USS Cole bombing, the rockets in Saudi Arabia, the plot to bomb American ships in the Persian Gulf, relationships with people committing bombings in Saudi Arabia, Osama bin Laden having a nuclear bomb, and finally a plan to hijack a plane and crash it into a ship. He claimed he faked everything to get out of being tortured, and finally, the true details of his interrogation came to light. They slammed him against a wall, shoved him into a small box, waterboarded him, deprived him of sleeping clothes, and threatened to turn him over to others who would no doubt murder him or torture him, or worse. They would verbally humiliate him and destroy his dignity. He was thrown around between CIA black sites until they finally got what they wanted out of him. Eventually, the charges were dropped, picked up, countersuits were filed, and the case is still ongoing to this day. Abdullah Öcalan. Abdullah Öcalan, also known as Apo, was born in 1949 in southeast Turkey. His mother was Turkish, while his father was Kurdish, a minority that was often looked down upon. He was born to a peasant family in a village, having vague political dreams when he was younger. He tried enlisting in the military but was refused. He claimed it was due to part of his ethnicity. Öcalan enrolled in university where he studied political science. It was here that Öcalan embraced Marxism and voiced left-wing sentiments. He organized several student movements and handed out leftist brochures, but was imprisoned for this. This forced him to then drop out and return to his village in southeastern Turkey, where he began advocating for an independent Kurdish state. By 1977, Öcalan and two comrades wrote a manifesto, the National Road to the Kurdish Revolution, with this being the blueprint for their political party, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or the PKK for short. In 1979, unrest in Turkey forced Öcalan and his associates to flee to Syria, where they began training to form the core of the PKK. It took them 7 years, but in 1984, they began an armed campaign for a Kurdish state by attacking a pro-government village in southeast Turkey. Their operations expanded all across southeast Turkey, including ambushes on military patrols, attacking village guards, bombings in cities. The Turkish state responded with a large-scale counterinsurgency campaign, village evacuations, and widespread human rights abuses. Over 30 to 40,000 people died by the late 1990s, many of them being Kurdish civilians. By this time, Turkey, the US, and the European Union designated the PKK as a terrorist organization, holding Öcalan personally responsible for terrorist attacks, becoming Turkey's most wanted fugitive. But through this, there were attempts at remedying the situation. In 1993, the first ceasefire was announced, but collapsed later that year after the Turkish president was assassinated. Both sides blamed each other, and the hell continued until the mid-1990s, where he went back to his base in Syria, overseeing the movement's political and military structure, all while living safely and comfortably under Syrian protection. This wouldn't last long, though, as Turkey threatened Syria with military action if they didn't expel Öcalan, and if they didn't stop supporting the PKK, leading to the 1998 Adana Agreement, where Syria finally kicked him out of the country. He immediately started searching for a new safe haven, practically touring Europe while doing so. He first went to Moscow. A Russian Duma committee initially voted to grant him asylum, but the government didn't want to formally approve it, with Turkey and the US pressuring them not to do so, so he was forced to look somewhere else. Italy was next, arriving in Rome with a forged passport. The Italian authorities arrested him on an international warrant, but placed him on house arrest in a hospital. Turkey requested Italy to extradite him, but Italy refused as the death penalty is in force in Turkey, and Italy was bound by European human rights standards. Rome couldn't find anyone else to take him, so for the next couple months, he was stuck in Italy. They wouldn't let him leave, but they wouldn't extradite him either. Eventually, the diplomatic pressure and lack of a legal framework forced Italy to release him, where he went to Greece. He was sent from Greece to Kenya to escape European scrutiny, where he was arranged to be brought to the Greek embassy in Kenya, the worst possible option. You might recall I mentioned earlier that it was around this time al-Nashri's cousin was identified as an S-word bomber. The bombing was at the US Embassy in Kenya. The country was crawling with US intelligence and special forces. And all this time, the CIA had been waiting to pounce. While he was in Europe, it would have been too risky for them to make a move. He was deep in a legal rabbit hole with way too many countries involved. If anything went wrong, it could destroy US-Europe relations and cause more harm. But when Greece took him in, it gave the US and Turkey an opening to launch their operations. As soon as he landed in Kenya, the Greek embassy was placed under surveillance. His cell phones were tapped, monitoring his conversations with political contacts as he sought asylum. He was abducted in Kenya while on his way from the Greek embassy to the airport in Kenya, an operation carried out by the CIA in the Turkish National Intelligence Organization. His trial was rigged from the start, with many people suspecting heavy CIA involvement and manipulation. His lawyers weren't allowed to meet him, and he wasn't allowed to meet his lawyers. He was interrogated for 10 days without legal counsel, and even the judge took part in his interrogation. Eventually, after a completely unfair legal battle, he was sentenced to death for treason and separatism, also being banned from holding public office for life. His death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, but some argue that's much worse. Carlos the Jackal. Elite Ramirez Sanchez, or better known as Carlos the Jackal, was born on the 12th of October 1949. Carlos was the son of a Marxist lawyer, Jose Altagracia Ramirez Navas. He was named Ilich after Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, a prominent Marxist activist and head of government of Soviet Russia, someone that Carlos's father clearly looked up to. He named his other children Lenin and Vladimir. Considering this, Carlos grew up in a very political environment in Venezuela. He joined the youth movement of the Venezuelan Communist Party and even spent summer camp at Camp Matanzas, a guerrilla warfare school run by the Cuban Intelligence Directorate, basically Cuba's version of the CIA. The same year, his parents divorced. His mother took him to London, where she tried to enroll him to the University of Paris, but eventually he ended up at the Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow. At the time, it was considered a notorious hotbed for recruiting foreign communists to the Soviet Union. Put simply, it was a political warfare program. 2 years later, though, in 1970, he was expelled from the university. If you manage to get yourself suspended from a school that's meant to radicalize you and prepare you to serve for the Soviet Union through espionage, sabotage, propaganda, and even assassination, something must be wrong with you. Shortly after being expelled, he volunteered for the Popular Front of the Liberation, or the PFLP, of Palestine, and was sent to a training camp. Once he graduated, he studied at a finishing school, codenamed H4, staffed entirely by Iraqi military near the Syria-Iraq border. And you can slowly see where this is going, being tossed around a political environment, learning and growing under extremely radical political teachings. He was given the name Carlos the Jackal during his time at the PFLP, after a recruiting officer gave him the codename Carlos, considering his South American roots. And he was consistently called the Jackal after The Guardian. The news outlet found a copy of the novel The Day of the Jackal in one of Carlos's old apartments. They then released a headline calling him Carlos the Jackal, and the rest was history. Once he completed guerrilla training, Carlos played an active role for the PFLP in North Jordan during the Black September conflict of 1970. The Black September conflict is often called the Jordanian Civil War and was an armed conflict between the PFLP and the King of Jordan, King Hussein. He built his reputation as a fighter during this conflict and was sent for even further training. Eventually, he left the Middle East and attended the Polytechnic of Central London, now known as the University of Westminster, while still working for the PFLP. 3 years later, in 1973, he carried out his first assassination on Joseph Saif, a Jewish businessman and vice president of the British Zionist Federation. It was on the 30th of December, Carlos called Joseph's home and ordered Joseph's maid to take him to Joseph. Carlos found Joseph in the bathroom, in his bath, and fired one bullet which bounced off Joseph just between his nose and upper lip, knocking Joseph unconscious, but didn't kill him. The Tokarev 7.62mm pistol subsequently jammed, forcing Carlos to flee the scene. The attack was announced as a retaliation for the Mossad's assassination in Paris of Mohammed Boudia, a leader of the PFLP. This was the first of many failures Carlos faced. He also admitted responsibility for a failed bomb attack on the bank Hapo Alim in London. His next attack, however, being the car bomb attacks on 3 French news outlets, accused of being pro-Israel. He also claimed to be the grenade thrower at a French restaurant, which ended up killing 2 people and injuring 30. This was a part of the 1974 French embassy attack in The Hague, which took place in the Netherlands. He also took part in 2 failed rocket-propelled grenade attacks on Israeli aeroplanes at the Orly airport near Paris in January 1975. The second attack led to a gunfight with the police at the airport and a 17-hour hostage standoff. It involved hundreds of riot police and the French Interior Minister. Carlos fled during the gunfights, while the other PFLP terrorists were allowed to Baghdad, Iraq. By now, government agencies internationally were starting to take notice, including the FBI and the CIA. In June 1975, one of Carlos's contacts were captured, Michel Mourkab, being interrogated by French intelligence. He told the agents that during a Parisian house party, 2 unarmed agents began interrogating Carlos, where he shot and killed them, escaping to Beirut. This catapulted Carlos to the top of the French and international wanted lists. In Beirut, he planned out the attack on the headquarters of OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, in Vienna. On the 21st of December 1975, a 6-person team was led by Carlos, which attacked a meeting which had all the major OPEC leaders present. More than 60 hostages were taken, with 3 being killed: an Austrian policeman, an Iraqi OPEC employee, and a member of the Libyan delegation. Carlos's demands: Austrian authorities read a communique about the Palestinian cause on Austrian radio and television networks every 2 hours, to avoid the threatened execution of a hostage every 15 minutes. The Austrian government agreed, and the communique was broadcasted as demanded. A day later, on the 22nd of December, the government provided PFLP and 42 hostages an airplane, which took them to Algeria, Libya, and back to Algeria, where many terrorists were granted asylum and hostages were freed. Soon after, however, a fellow PFLP agent accused Carlos of having received a large sum of money, somewhere around $20 million to $50 million, for the release of Arab hostages. Carlos claimed that it was the money paid by the Saudis on behalf of the Iranians and was diverted en route and lost by the revolution. Carlos then left Algeria and attended a meeting of senior PFLP officials to justify his failure in executing 2 senior OPEC hostages, them being the finance minister of Iran and the oil minister of Saudi Arabia. They eventually decided that he failed the mission and expelled him. A bounty was then put on his head, with 4 men traveling to Tehran in 1976 to kill Carlos, but it was never revealed what happened in those meetings. Not long after, Carlos attempted to build his own independent network, called the Organization of Ahmed Arab Struggle, but this didn't last long. Years passed as he tried and failed to set up his organization, which resulted in the Syrian government forcing to expel him. He searched for over 2 years, trying to find a country where he could seek asylum, when he settled in Sudan. But by this time, enough was enough. In 1993, CIA contractor Billy Waugh was tasked with finding Carlos and arresting him. They searched for 4 months, managing to identify a man who was working as a bodyguard for Carlos, and watched him until the bodyguard led them to Carlos's apartment on the 8th of February, 1994. They established an observation post in an abandoned hospital across the street and watched him for another 4 months, eventually handing their intel to French intelligence. French intelligence offered the Sudanese government tons of communication equipment and supplied them with satellite pictures of everything they needed. The Sudanese foreign minister was invited to Paris to negotiate the extradition of Carlos, but he was adamant that his culture forbade him from giving up a guest in his country. But eventually, they convinced him. All it took to give up Carlos was the promise of World Bank and IMF aid to help ease their foreign debt, as well as videos and photos of Carlos partying, drinking, and being intimate with women, which offended their Muslim faith. In the eyes of the foreign minister, Carlos turned from a combatant, someone who fought for the Palestinian cause, to a hoodlum. His trial stretched on until the 23rd of December 1997, where he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and later 2 more life sentences were added. Through the years, Carlos has continuously voiced his support for Osama bin Laden and his attacks on the United States. Pablo Escobar. He's one of the most infamous drug lords out there. While the world frowns upon him, the streets of Medellin cheer his name. Born on the 1st of December in Rio Negro, Colombia, Pablo Escobar was dealt a rough hand, being born in poverty among 6 other siblings. He struggled hard. Life wasn't easy for him on the streets, with him leaving to be with his cousin when he was just 17. Coming back a couple years later, he decided to start the first of many criminal activities, just to make some money, creating and selling fake high school diplomas. Unknowing to him, this would be the first of many illegal activities he'd carry out. He dropped out not long after, continuing to sell even more butchered diplomas now that he was out of high school, with this being the small start to what ended up being one of the world's most illegal industries to date. After high school, Escobar didn't give up on his education just yet. He went to college. His goals set to be a criminal lawyer, a politician, and eventually El Presidente. His goals were ambitious, but he worked hard. Sadly, that wasn't enough. As hard as he worked, he was forced to drop out because of his poverty. He couldn't pay for his education, marking the beginning of his criminal career. Not being able to put food on the table and knowing no other way to make ends meet other than all of the illegal happenings he'd been exposed to ever since he was a kid, Escobar began his illegal activities almost immediately after dropping out of the Universidad Autónoma Latinoamericana and started a wide range of criminal activities. Starting small, Escobar sold illegal cigarettes and fake lottery tickets. He took tombstones, sandblasted their inscriptions, and resold them. Compared to his more well-known drug empire, this was pretty tame. However, his way of life turned from a life of harmless crime to violent acts pretty quickly. Soon enough, Escobar knew his way around the streets and started joining gangs to steal cars off the road. They went around in gangs and groups to commit motor vehicle theft, but his connections and actions raised him up in the food chain. Controlling these gangs, his crimes became more violent, employing criminals. He sent them to kidnap various people who owned him and demanded ransoms. Escobar's gang started becoming notorious for kidnapping and demanding ransoms from people, but their name and reputation was very well known after kidnapping and killing Diego Echeverria, a famous local businessman. The family of Diego paid Escobar $50,000, putting his and his gang's name on the map. For about a decade now, Escobar was smooth sailing. With him being involved in leading organized crime for this long, nothing seemed like it could go wrong. Until it did. At this point in time, around 1975, booger sugar trade was on the rise. Escobar saw this and thought nothing of it, jumping on the train, trafficking booger sugar throughout South America. But he was rising and growing too fast. Colombian authorities finally caught wind of his activities and caught him trafficking almost 40 kilograms of booger sugar in his spare tire through Ecuador. Things were over. He was arrested in May 1976, returning from Ecuador. However, things didn't quite play out in the way the Colombian Security Services, or DAS, thought it would. After getting the first judge removed from the lawsuit, he bribed the second judge for a verdict in his favor, and he and all the other prisoners involved were let go. Simple as that. This is when he learned the power that money holds. He bribed tons of officials and politicians to gain more and more power and control, giving them the carrot or the stick, or as he put it, silver or lead. It was as simple as, you accept the bribes, you get paid. If you reject them, you get assassinated. This was his intimidation method. With money, he could do anything. Nobody could stand in his way. If they did, they'd either move aside for the cash or he'd force them to. Soon he realized the true potential he held, so he put his plan into motion. Bribing several Colombian politicians, he had them in his pocket, both conservative and liberal parties. His goal wasn't power, yet it was self-preservation, safety, and ensuring the law wouldn't be an issue to him ever again. Finally, every politician he had in his pocket was elected, giving him access to almost every level of the Colombian government, pulling strings like he was playing puppets. In fact, he was doing just that. Now that he had taken care of the authorities, it was time for him to get moving on the ever-increasing booger sugar trade, unknowing to Escobar would be one of the final nails in the coffin for him. In April 1978, he met with drug lords, speaking with them about what was most likely trafficking booger sugar. This was later confirmed when around 19,000 kilograms, or 190 tons of booger sugar, entered U.S. soil and territory. And from here on out, it was exponential growth. Demand for booger sugar in the United States was higher than ever, so naturally, Escobar did what he had to do with the supply. After the first trade of 190 tons, the Medellin cartel expanded rapidly. More shipments were used for smuggling, more routes were created, and more main entry points into the U.S. were formed in California, South Florida, and Puerto Rico, with other parts of the country being used as well. Later, Escobar and his cartel co-founder Carlos Lajer worked on a new transshipment point on an island in the Bahamas known as Norman's Cay. It was about 220 miles southeast from the coast of Florida. However, Escobar never bought this island. Lajer had it as his own solo venture, while Escobar transformed it into a paradise for both luxury and trafficking booger sugar into the United States. Escobar bought most of the land on the island, which had a 1-kilometer airstrip constructed, a harbor, hotels, houses, boats, aircrafts, and a massive refrigerated warehouse to store, well, guess what? Booger sugar. For the next 4 years, this was the route mainly used by the Medellin cartel. It was efficient and got the job done right. It generated hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, which he used to buy over 20 square kilometers of land in Antigua to build his hacienda. This mansion had a zoo, a private lake, a sculpture garden, and tons of other amenities for his family and members of the cartel to enjoy. This was the height of his wealth, controlling 80% of the global booger sugar supply from mainly that single island, raking in hundreds of millions in net profit every single week. He was a billionaire. Compared to today, he would be in the top 25 richest people in the world. The wealth he gained from his drug trade had made him unstoppable. With almost infinite resources, he could accomplish anything, even doing the government's job for them. The power he held over one of the strongest world governments and even puppeteering his own government is something completely unprecedented and something that will most likely never be able to happen again. As far as he had come, he didn't forget his roots. He financed the development of several Medellin's poverty-stricken neighborhoods and built housing, schools, hospitals, churches, and football stadiums. In 1980, he joined politics, something he had been dreaming for since high school. He was involved and supported in the formation of the Liberal Party of Colombia, and 2 years later ended up getting into the Colombian Congress. This was not a plan or a ploy for his cartel or drug empire. Escobar knew he had to do right by his people and wanted to make real changes to his homeland. He was granted parliamentary immunity and the right to a diplomatic passport, and was very well known for all of his charities and his philanthropic nature. The public loved him. He felt like a king, and he might as well have been one. He was in the perfect position he'd been dreaming of since day one. Nothing could stop him now. Everything was smooth sailing from here on out, or so he thought. But his entry into politics would be cut short from day one, when the Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, had accused him of illegal activities on his first day in Congress. Things were looking bad for Escobar, as the subordinates of Lara Bonilla started investigating his arrest for the 39 kilos of booger sugar smuggled and trafficked in from Ecuador. And only a couple months after the investigation started, the Liberal Party leader expelled him from the party. Escobar fought back, denying the accusations, but to no result. He announced his retirement from politics just 4 years after he had started in January of 1984. Lara Bonilla was assassinated 3 months later. Escobar was wanted, and while bribing and murdering worked everywhere else, he couldn't get his control over the Colombian judiciary. In the fall of '85, bribing and murdering several judges, Escobar requested the government for a conditional surrender, where he wouldn't be extradited to the United States. This was denied at first. However, after forming an organization known as the Los Extraditable Organization, he created to fight the extradition policy in Colombia near the end of '86, the policy was declared illegal as being signed by a presidential delegation, not the president himself. Since the president at the time did not sign it himself, the policy was declared illegal and Escobar had won over the judiciary. However, soon enough, the new president had put the decision on review, with his victory being short-lived at best. However, Escobar had moved past that, still holding a grudge against the Liberal Party leader, to which he had him assassinated for kicking him out of the party and politics as a whole. But that wasn't the end. He wanted to cripple the party. The leader's next in line was scheduled for a flight on 18th of August 1989, on which a bomb was planted. Avincia Flight 203 was destroyed, with all 107 people on board dying, except for one man, the successor to the Liberal Party leader, who survived as he had missed the plane. His life was intact, but only by chance and luck. Escobar had murdered 107 innocent people, among which were 2 American nationals. And this is when the American government had decided to intervene directly. After this tragedy, the president's administration at the time moved against Escobar and associated drug cartels. After negotiations with the government, Escobar agreed to surrender and cease all criminal activity in exchange for a reduced sentence and preferential treatment. Escobar gave himself up to authorities in 1991, and with the new constitution passed the same year, he was not extradited to the US. While the act was highly controversial at the time due to people speculating whether Escobar, along with several other drug lords with power within the government, had forced their hand, Escobar was relaxing in his own luxurious private prison, which was better than most people's homes. Serving time in La Catedral, he had a football pitch, a giant dollhouse, a bar, a jacuzzi, and even an entire waterfall. However, reports that he kept his criminal enterprise going were surfacing. Public outcry started to pile up. And because of this, the Colombian government was forced to move Escobar into a traditional prison, one with bars on the cells and metal trays for food. But Escobar knew what was coming, and being prepared for this was an understatement. Pablo Escobar proceeded to make one of the greatest prison escapes ever known to man, even to this day. When special forces raided the prison, he held 2 VIPs who came along as hostages, then shut off the power. The army was in the dark, unable to shoot or see. For 12 hours, they remained in the prison, while Escobar had escaped ages ago into the forest, humiliating the government. And from here on out, he was on the run. Wanted by the Colombian government, the United States government, and under siege from a rival cartel, everywhere Escobar turned was an enemy. All this while, however, the CIA was at just as big as a loss as Escobar. They'd spent hundreds of millions of dollars on finding him, and now they're cooperating with two different militaries, as well as an entirely separate special task force created with the sole purpose of finding and capturing or killing Escobar. Search Block was an ad hoc special operations unit of the National Police of Colombia. It had over 600 members trained by the United States and Colombian Army, a special task force designated to locate and disassemble cartels and their leaders. They were heavily assisted by the CIA in triangulating his position, tapping radio and phone calls, feeding intel to the Search Block, resorting to desperate measures at certain times, hiding in tents, burning millions of dollars in cash to stay warm. Escobar was still a notorious daredevil, as while the entirety of the United States of America were looking for him in a nationwide manhunt, he posed in front of the White House with his son. However, finally, in December 1993, he was found in a middle-class home in suburban Medellin by Colombian authorities with the help of the intel the CIA gave them, where a shootout started between Escobar and the CIA Special Forces. He was trapped, cornered, and for once he'd been outsmarted and outgunned. Survival was the only objective for him at that point. He had to do something. He couldn't just let it all go. He refused to give it up. He had to escape. And then he saw his one chance. Using the last of his strength, he tried to get up on the roof, but it was too late. Escobar was shot and died almost as soon as he trampled onto the roof. His death and funeral was widespread news, with over 25,000 people attending his funeral simply due to the impact he made on his people with all his positive changes to the nation, despite his nefarious crimes. This ended the chapter of the world's most dangerous and powerful drug lords. Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden, one of history's most notorious terrorists and criminals of all time. Everyone knows just how nefarious he was. He needs no introduction. Instead, I'm going to directly jump into how the CIA killed him, one of their hardest targets to find and kill ever. But before doing that, here's a long laundry list of his acts. He played a key and important role in the Soviet-Afghan War. He was alleged to be involved in the 1988 Gilgit massacre. He created Al-Qaeda, one of the world's worst terrorist organizations ever, was part of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in the Gulf War, was expelled from Saudi Arabia, declared war on America, directed hundreds of terrorist attacks globally, did 9/11, and that was the trigger for the CIA. They began sending troops to Afghanistan to interrogate the Taliban and capture Al-Qaeda operatives. The Special Activities Division was leading the investigation, and the target was clear. Osama bin Laden was wanted, captured, or killed. By 2005, it was made clear that bin Laden was in Pakistan, so they began capturing more and more operatives. Their goal was to find people who had information on top Al-Qaeda leadership, those who could give up someone who was close to bin Laden. And just when they thought they were getting closer, bin Laden would release time-sensitive videos confirming his survival, almost taunting the CIA. It was an unstoppable force against an immovable object. The CIA was tasked with using any means necessary. Hundreds, if not thousands, of CIA black sites were used all over the world to torture and interrogate Al-Qaeda operatives. They would leave these people without food or water for days, stringing their life along hours at a time, manipulating them physically and mentally. The CIA soon realized the focus of the investigation was to be centered on couriers for Al-Qaeda, seen as these couriers were the ones who would provide communications for bin Laden. In 2002, interrogators had heard about an Al-Qaeda courier who was part of the Inner Circle, and this courier led the CIA directly to Osama bin Laden. Eventually, bin Laden was traced to a mansion near the border of Pakistan, and this is where they conducted an extremely risky operation. The intel was not 100% accurate, and the mansion was nothing short of a fortress. On May 2nd, 2011, the United States conducted Operation Neptune Spear. Personally approved by Barack Obama, 24 Navy SEALs and 2 Black Hawks took flight to Jalalabad, an Afghan city over 120 miles away. The compound stuck out like a sore thumb to the houses nearby, had a huge wall running across the perimeter, with designs being perfect to hide itself from satellites and any other surveillance. It had no internet, no landline, all garbage was burned, and nobody was let inside. The CIA tried several times, sending in operatives under disguise to try and confirm bin Laden's presence, but failed in all attempts. It was a strong lead. It wasn't surefire, but it was all they had. This is what 10.5 years of investigation from one of the world's most dangerous and powerful intelligence agencies had come up with. Navy SEAL Team 6 infiltrated the compound, cleared it of all residents, before finally, Osama bin Laden was shot and killed. They cleared out the house, taking as much evidence as possible, and exfiltrated. And alright guys, that wraps up the CIA's Most Wanted Explained. I'm sorry this video wasn't like the FBI top 10. The only issue is the CIA doesn't keep a top 10. They are, by no surprise, super secretive about everything. So yeah, this was the most famous cases of the most wanted people by the CIA, and I thought it was a unique video. I haven't seen it on YouTube yet, so I hope you enjoyed. And if you'd like to see an FBI Most Wanted Explained, comment down below. Maybe I'll make one of these every single year and cover some new people that came out from the CIA. I don't know, it could be interesting. Just comment down below if you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It means the world. And listen to me on Spotify. Join the Patreon for early access, and thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all, and this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some horrifying Reddit confession threads. You guys really liked the last one, so here I am making another one. Comment down below if you'd like to see another Reddit confession threads video in the future. And yeah, today's confession threads are scary, horrifying, sinister, and downright disturbing, so you'll want to stick around. I appreciate you stopping by. It means the world. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel's goal is 1 million subscribers, so please subscribe, and I'd love for you to join the community. Follow me on Instagram and Spotify, and yeah, comment down below if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. But all right, this video will be long enough already, so without further ado, let's get into some horrifying Reddit confession threads. One drug-fueled night killed me. January 12th, 2024 will forever live in infamy. That Friday night irreversibly turned my happy, healthy, successful life upside down. This is a tale of party drugs. It's also a life and death journey I could have never imagined in my wildest dreams. Call it a harrowing dive into extremes of the human condition, or a case study at the intersection of medicine, pharma, policy, and brain science. As the one who lived it, writing this 11 months later is my confession, assembling these shards of a shattered world into one broken mosaic. Here it goes. At my brother's 50th birthday in Cabo, booger sugar fueled the festivities, and by no means a user. I'm also not a novice. I'm a typical millennial who never looked for drugs, but is not afraid to try something passed by friends. For context, I've lived a drama-free life, successful by any metric. I have a bunch of advanced degrees and manage a small but thriving international company. I'm also an understated middle child by nature, so making noise or having weird stuff happen is not my deal. Until that night, I'd coasted without anything major ever going wrong. Being in my early 40s, my partying days are in the past, and January was the first time in probably a decade since business school touching party drugs. Over several hours at a place called Bagatelle, where the opening dinner of the 3-day bash took place. I had a dozen plus lines and bumps of booger sugar, sipping rum. It was a festive, if over-the-top scene as our group of 40 danced atop the long birthday table, stepping over plates while champagne magnums carried between waiters were poured directly into mouths like parishioners taking communion. It was not a typical Friday night, but all were having fun celebrating my bro. So chemically speaking, booger sugar and alcohol were the first ingredients in my blood. As midnight approached, I was handed by a banker what I was told was a pill brought from San Francisco. I had taken pills twice, once at a wedding in Prague, before that at a club in Aruba, and had good experiences. I didn't particularly want to roll that night in Cabo, being late and tired from flying out of DC at the crack of dawn, having just gotten back from Colombia days before, so I nearly said, no thanks. But your brother only turns half a century once, and I didn't overthink it. I split the cap in half with my fingers, swallowed what I figured was a light dose, and kept on with the party. The biggest mistake of my life, across all years, the one that changed everything. When added to booger sugar, pills instantly had a negative effect. In previous rolls, I hadn't mixed it. This time, I felt an overwhelming anxiety. An hour into that state, I had to leave the party. I was consumed by unease and unable to talk. When I got back to my room, I couldn't sleep. It was no surprise since booger sugar belabors the process of settling down, so I lay awake, passing out after sunrise. When I awoke that afternoon, the angst hadn't abated. I stayed in my room, skipping day 2 of the birthday bash, waiting for the malaise to pass. I'd never had a mood disorder or taken a psych med, so long-lasting unease was entirely new. Day 3 came and went with me cooped up, my phone filled with messages as I skipped the close of the 72-hour celebration. And that's when the real problem started. On the 3rd night, when I tried to sleep, no sleep came. None. On day 4, January 16th, I flew to Mexico City for routine work meetings and events. The same pattern continued that night, and the one after. No sleep. By the end of the 6th sleepless night, having barely scraped through what would have otherwise been stress-free obligations in CDMX, I flew home to DC, assuming all would return to normal in my bed. Nothing changed back home. A 7th sleepless night became an 8th, with an hour or 2 of broken rest, constantly springing wide awake with churning anxiety. It was as if my brain had gotten stuck in fight or flight mode with no off switch. In my prior life, a restless sleep, say from a red-eye flight before a big speech or a tough board meeting, would lead to sheer exhaustion the following evening, crashing hard from the lack of rest, but catch-up sleep never came with this bizarre pill insomnia. I didn't get sleepy, no matter how many nights passed. After 2 weeks, I knew in my gut something big was up. After seeing my family doctor, I was referred to a psychiatrist for the first time, who began to treat me with introductory sleeping pills, starting with trazodone. Those didn't put a dent in my insomnia, and I was rotated to stronger categories of prescription. This process repeated for the next month as I worked with a growing roster of psychiatrists and sleep neurologists who wrote scripts for sequentially more heavily controlled meds. These trials included every sedative under the sun. I won't relist them, suffice to say, I left no stone unturned. Just the categories of sleeping-inducing RXs I cycled through, searching with doctors for one that worked, included, and he lists a ton, but some notable ones, just antipsychotics, anticonvulsants, anti-sublexics, melatonin modulators, Z-drugs, beta blockers, tricyclics, tetracyclics, benzos, adrenergic receptor agonists, and that's just a ton. He also says, I had every blood work panel done, a sleep study, sleeping 50 minutes across the night, an MRI, EEG, hired a CBTI coach, etc. Nothing helped or provided doctors any insight into what happened in my brain. By the 3-month mark, I'd trialed 40 plus prescriptions. Here, let me explain how so-called psych drugs work. When prescribed on label for mood disorders like depression, anxiety, and bipolar, these drugs take weeks, if not months, to take effect. But when prescribed off-label for the sole purpose of promoting sleep, these same drugs either work or don't work on the first night, providing diminishing returns as tolerance builds. That's how I was able, under doctor supervision, to test every hypnotic RX in existence over 90 days, searching for an elusive solution. The newest designer meds, like the Doras, had to be specifically ordered by the pharmacy. As weeks passed, I became so desperate for sleep that I shelled out $1,000 for one called Quivided, which has helped Matthew Perry, not knowing if it would work. It didn't. Against these sleepless nights, I tried to wear myself down, spending every day in the gym and running miles outside. My goal became to tire myself to sleep. I was like a warrior fighting this battle and inadvertently got into the best shape of my life. People's passing compliments couldn't imagine the dark source of my transformation. Still, nothing changed at night. Piece by piece, I removed as many stressors as possible, hoping that putting one on the back burner might help. So fighting a tug of war with my heart, that exhaustion eventually won. I pushed all intensity and passion from my personal life into the background in a way that's haunted me since. At work, I'd been doing what I could do to keep up on top of a running company, masking my increasingly drained appearance and depleted mental state, reminiscent of Edward Norton's workplace struggle with insomnia in Fight Club. Anyone who saw me in those days will know that the giveaway of this scene being fiction is Norton's eyes aren't nearly sunken enough, as mine had become. On days when I couldn't function, I couched my absence as migraines among colleagues and friends, too embarrassed to say I wasn't sleeping, something that comes naturally to everyone, as it did me for 42 years prior. On top of this, I was ashamed by the source, a frivolous party drug, an admission I couldn't broadcast beyond doctors, so I gutted it out in silence. Eventually, the mental and physical toll became unsustainable, and I had to start an indefinite leave of absence from the job I loved. I cut out all travel and commitments, canceling trips, reassigning roles, and appointing surrogates. Still, nothing I did to streamline my life changed the sleeplessness. I never yawned or got tired. All I could ever manage was an hour or two of medicated sleep, holding out hope with each passing week that a new drug cocktail might finally bring restorative rest. Across 3 months, I'd invested tens of thousands of dollars, seeing all experts in a 4-hour radius of DC, most of whom don't take insurance. Yet, I was no closer to a solution, let alone a basic understanding of what medically I was facing. I went to hospital ERs, begging to be put into a coma for just one night of rest, as Jordan Peterson, who I'd met once, had done for 8 days in Russia, but not being S-word, despite insomnia as its biggest risk factor. I could never get past triage. I reduced my daily routine to the commonest activities: sushi diet, textbook sleep hygiene. No matter what I did to Lululemonify my life, I couldn't sleep. It was a hell you can't imagine without relief. Not one night. By mid-April, month 4, encouraged by my doctors and the few people I'd led into my struggle, I took the next step. I checked myself into the first of a series of private hospital residences to treat this mysterious condition with 24-hour care. Across the past 2 decades, I might have taken 4 sick days. So flying to a clinic, let alone leaving work for weeks, was out of character to say the least. In late April and early May, I traveled to Texas, going inpatient at one of the top health facilities in the country. It's the kind of private hospital oasis set among manicured gardens and quiet walking paths that takes away your phone on arrival, so nothing can distract getting well. While there, I was placed on a different kind of med, an SSRI, with no apparent relation to sleep. It was prescribed to treat the increasing anxiety surrounding me as I shut my life down. Lexapro, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, affects 5-HT, the same neurotransmitter as the pill I took. Miraculously and unexpectedly for doctors, Lexapro put me to sleep. For 2 weeks, my life went back to normal. I flew home filled with gratitude, energized to restart where I left off with more passion than ever. I jumped into work and rebuilt the personal connections I'd so missed. After what I'd been through, life had handed back in a way that's impossible to describe unless you lose yours for a while. I was beaming. No one second guessed the positive results. After all, Lexapro targets the same protein as the pill I took, serotonin, a signifier as to what had gone wrong back in January. I felt like I'd beaten the scariest thing I'd ever faced, and for 2 weeks, Lexapro was my lifeline. But in a cruel twist of fate, so hard to look back on now, as I adjusted to the SSRI, the insomnia came back. I stuck with the trial for 7 weeks in the hope it would pass, but my sleeplessness only got worse than ever. I switched to another serotonin modulators like Trinalex, but nothing put me back to sleep. The honeymoon of Lexapro became a bittersweet memory of rest that disappeared as unexpectedly as it arrived. A few weeks later in June, I finally saw the chief sleep neurologist at Johns Hopkins Medicine, Dr. Early, who I've been trying to get in with for months but is booked a year in advance as the national authority of sleep science in the brain. A family friend on the Hopkins board helped me get up on the list. On hearing my story after examining my chart and consulting with his colleague at Hopkins, neurologist George Ricorte, a leading researcher on amphetamine and the pill I took neurotoxicity since the 90s, Dr. Early told me what I'd taken in Mexico caused a 1 in a million reaction in my brain. When combined with the volatile punch of dopamine from the booger sugar, the pill created a serotonin syndrome that fried my 5-HT system through toxicity. Serotonin controls sleep in a way that requires a delicate balance. This is why a few days of insomnia after taking a pill is typical, just not permanent. For most people, down-regulated receptors restore, but in rare cases, irreversible neurosis can occur. Dr. Early told me I wasn't the first he'd seen, and referred to literature about a range of pathologies from even one-time pill users. With candor, I accepted. Dr. Early couldn't say if my brain would ever recover, why Lexapro worked, then stopped, or if anything would let me sleep again. Seeing the exhaustion in my eyes, he agreed to treat me on an experimental basis and ordered a week-long sleep study for more data. Becoming the test patient to one of America's most seasoned neurologists was both affirming, given the extremes I've been through, and terrifying for what it signaled about the road ahead. June gave way to July, and the 6-month anniversary of my insomnia was fast approaching. As this dreary milestone neared, I became isolated and was losing hope. I hadn't been to work in months, had retreated from my inner circle, and lost precious parts of my life that meant the world to me. More than $200,000 had been spent going to the country's top clinics, ending up at the Retreat, a full-service facility near Baltimore that runs $50,000 every 20 days and takes zero insurance. I'd lost even more in unrealized projects and ideas, but no price mattered. Investing whatever it took to get better, knowing not just sleep, but increasingly everything was on the line. Still, after seeking the best of the best, no one could stop the insomnia. Tell me how long the hell would last, or if it would ever leave. Doctors had also run out of medications to try, the last being the anesthetic Xyrem, aka GHB, the infamous date R-word drug from Diddy's parties, a Schedule I narcotic prescribed by Dr. Early as an extreme measure. The most controlled substance in America, only one central pharmacy is authorized to dispense it. Xyrem was taken forever to get approved, required passing through complex safety hoops, and cost $25,000 per month. Receiving it was a month away, with no indication it would work where others failed. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture considered among the worst. Losing a single hour of rest makes Division I athletes miss twice as many shots the next day. The most sublime music ever written, Bach's Goldberg Variations, was commissioned to treat Mad King Ludwig's insomnia when sleeplessness drove him crazy. We've all experienced at some point the relentless feeling after one sleepless night from a red eye. In just 3 days, sleep deprivation breaks prisoners of war into giving up classified secrets. So by the time my insomnia hit the 6-month mark in July, the once unfathomable thought of cutting my life short slowly started to creep into my mind as a last resort for rest. Insomnia had become my deathbed. Compounding this was a chemical catch-22. It's paradoxical, but the most effective drugs doctors use for life-saving sleep come up with black box warnings in fine print about triggering depression and S-word. So my hopelessness around not sleeping was being pharmacologically amped up by the meds I'd been prescribed to sleep. I was trapped in a damned if you do, damned if you don't loop, with no escape between crippling depression from not sleeping or the same from sleeping pills. This snowballing downward spiral is how, coming from a guy who'd in December 2023 been the happiest in my entire life with a thriving company I was expanding, cherished waterfront in Canada, and on the Chesapeake I'd spent years developing into Gardens of Eden to enjoy forever, a skylit place in the city, financial freedom, beloved mentors and colleagues surrounding me, a dream job that took me everywhere on the earth, a full heart, in short, all I ever wanted and more. And by the time of July 2024 rolled around, the person I'd become wasn't recognizable as me. It was 2 lives because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think, engage, or feel pleasure. I was a walking zombie who hadn't rested since January. It was worse than anything I could have ever imagined would happen to anyone I knew. Least of all me. So for an eternal optimist who'd never felt down for any stretch, much less considered the idea of ending it all in my wildest nightmares, even as something I'd understand in others' suffering, never able to grasp what could bring someone to that state. And by July, S-word ideation had become my everyday battle. It's sometimes said that such things are selfish. I thought that way too. But through the unending attrition, what came to feel selfish was continuing to drag the world down with me. A clean break would free us all. Let me be clear on something. Weakness played no part in what follows. Those who've known me know I'm virtually unbreakable. No one builds the life I did without limitless resolve, nor could they endure the parts of the story still to come without iron will. But the laws of nature are fact. No man, no matter how resilient or brave, can fight biology forever and win. Sleep exists for a reason. We cannot be without it. There is no alternative. After spending the sleepless night of July 4th watching fireworks on the Baltimore skyline from my room at the retreat, remembering my old life watching fireworks the year before on the Treadavon River among friends, now a distant memory from my past life when all was well. 2 mornings later, as I gave up my last ounce of hope in never getting better. Hope was replaced by the sinking feeling of a kamikaze pilot for a one-way mission, summoned to his final test of courage. The universe had left one way to end the endlessness and get the rest I desperately sought for so long. Fighting back tears, I scribbled a short goodbye note, remembered a final time the people in life I'd been so in love with before this all started, cursed God for cursing me, and committed S-word. I've always flown under the radar, never seeking attention. So doing the unthinkable wasn't a masked plea, as it can be with those who choose other alternatives and rarely succeed by design. That wasn't me for a minute. I had already tried every path for help. I'm a quick study, and my method instead represented a decision. I made a strong noose and secured it at such a height that nothing could allow me to turn back once the process began, knowing there would be excruciating pain before blacking out. I told myself it couldn't feel worse than what I'd already endured. So I bit my lip, prepared for that moment and the eternal unknown to follow. Against every probable outcome, I partially failed or partially succeeded, depending on the measuring stick. You could call it my first piece of good luck in 6 months, coming at a crucial time. On the other hand, what I did forever changed my life. I had and wanted, the people around me, and all that followed. I'm here, but not in a way that feels like me. No matter how far I search for a cure this time, this story has a morose second act. Since the original intent was to share an advisory, not explore psychological torture, I hadn't planned to delve into the next chapter of my saga since July. But because it's all the ripple effect from January, and although it includes shameful details, I'm writing this map of uncharted territory for others who get blown off course, so here's the rest of my tale. At the end of my third week in the retreat outside of Baltimore, in early July, with the best doctors in the world no more closer to helping me than any had been at the start of my journey 6 months ago, I gave up. Despite sharing with my doctors a growing belief that the end was drawing near, and petrified family members calling to warn of the despair in my voice and feared was coming, naively nurses had loaned me a 14-foot charger cable. Outside in some woods nearby, out of view, I fastened the cable to a sturdy branch on an overturned log above a stream and doubled it twice around my neck. I've always been drawn to water, so above a trickling creek was the only spot on campus I could live with, so to speak, to say goodbye. I rolled my body off the edge. The noose caught, cinched tight, and I passed out. Sometime later, no one knows how long, one of the cords snapped, then the other, and I fell. 2 bursts of orange flooded my head in flashes of the most intense pain I've ever known as consciousness returned. My eyes popped open and I jolted back to life, like a scene from a movie, but the right side of my body was numb. I had twitching fingers, double vision, pulsating pupils, uncontrollable shivering, and other weird thermodynamic effects from starving my brain of oxygen long enough to shut it down. This was all later diagnosed as a brain injury to my left hemisphere. When alert enough to rise, I stumbled back to the retreat and turned myself in. I was escorted to the emergency room in delirium, coping with the effects of the brain injury I just suffered, compounded by the insomnia that broke me down in the first place. Nothing would let me escape. I was trapped in an episode of Black Mirror or The Twilight Zone. Then, in a twist of dark humor from the universe that even made Dr. Early laugh when he heard it, I became sleepy in the ER for the first time in 6 months. Somehow, restarting my brain brought intense fatigue, which none of the 40-plus medications could ever do, so I dozed in and out of my consciousness for 3 days as MRIs, echocardiograms, and other tests were done to look for necrosis or a heart attack. Despite my self-induced asphyxiation, I was being kept on the hospital's stroke unit, rather than its protected psych floor. My well-groomed appearance and polished manner may have deceived doctors into not seeing the risk, ignoring what had just brought me in. That's how, shortly before I was scheduled to be transferred to a trauma unit on the afternoon of July 9th, still in anoxic delirium, I darted from the sitter watching me, when distracted to the 6th floor exit down the hall. Without pause, I dove headfirst down the stairwell center, figuring a 6-story drop would end the suffering once and for all. But the sitter chased as I went over the edge, catching my foot for a split second, long enough before my sock slipped through her hand that I flipped as I free fell down the stairwell center. In midair somersaults, I bounced off a railing, zigzagging my trajectory to land headfirst 3 floors down instead of free falling 6 stories. Cries above sounded the alarm as doctors from every floor rushed to the stairwell, peering down in disbelief through my motionless, glazed eyes. Against all odds, the Red Sea parted. I had a pulse, still. Somehow, going 3 floors didn't kill me, as it did fellow musical soul Liam Payne recently. But when the back of my head hit the concrete, it deviated my eyes in a way that makes 3D vision hard, called strabismus, and gave me acquired aphantasia, which means losing your mind's eye. When I close my eyes now, I'm blind. Every image from my life was erased on impact, so I can't picture what anyone looks like, envision the future, lock onto my eyes in the mirror, read without saying words in my head, navigate without GPS, in a myriad of ways just shutting off your imagination reshapes you. I was told I'm a visual person my whole life, so losing this feels like losing me. In more dark humor from fate, acquired aphantasia, like the pill insomnia, is exceedingly rare because rear occipital brain damage happens less frequently than to frontal lobes, like head-on car crashes. So I'm navigating this new condition again in the dark, flying blind. After my fall, the scent of liability attracted hospital lawyers like sharks to blood who threw the book at me to cover up errors. I was strapped to a gurney, sent to a ward, and locked away for 40 days. Most of the time on one-on-one, which is like solitary confinement, but with someone standing at arm's length, 24/7, even in the shower, even in bed. Still in a trance from my head colliding with cement, I thought about Noah in the flood and Moses in the desert. I began to talk to my shadow, this alter ego beside me, like the voice in the burning bush on the mountain. Her name was Sam. When I was strong enough to walk, I walked in circles, endlessly through that wilderness, a stranger in a strange land. Sam's voice beside me brought periodic news of the outside, beyond the walls. An assassin shot Trump at a rally, but the bullet grazed his ear. A giant bridge across the Chesapeake collapsed nearby, cars dropping into the water as stones into a pond. My world, inside and out, had become magical realism. 100 years of solitude. Fiction morphed into fact in this Borgesian labyrinth. My sleepless life was the requiem for a dream. Given my apparent penchant for transforming supposedly secure campuses into death traps, ward leadership was terrified of a lawsuit. So that meant all eyes on me, day and night, a never-ending watch. My world was paper scrubs, paper spoons, rubber mattress, plastic pillow, no sheets, metal toilet, no lid, Stockholm shower, no curtain. Strip searches at sunup and sundown, the pattern repeated day after day. I'd become their Al Capone, Hannibal Lecter, without the Goldberg variations as company, the Kurt Cobain of insomnia. But their overzealous posturing didn't matter. The moment to save me came before I arrived. I did my time and 6 weeks later was released in mid-August. Since then, I've survived by planting and cutting trees and long adventures with my dog, trying to keep at bay's depressions, downward pull of gravity with a force I never knew existed, like I'm wearing lead shoes, worn out by a year without rest, now navigating deficits of new brain trauma. I keep thinking back to my life before this all started and the dreams I had to leave behind along the way. I can't understand why any of it happened, and I still can't sleep much. Most recently, I've spent September, October, and November fighting poison with poison by doing every last-ditch brain reset known to man, including 6 weeks of TMS, 5 weeks of K, 4 SGB neck injections used by the military, and soon tri-weekly ECT under general anesthesia. All that's missing for Christmas are 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. But no brain reset touches me. My mind is blank. My heart is out. There are no more stars in the sky. When you add it up, what I've lived since January is so unbelievable it couldn't be fiction, only fact. And now the sleepless nights that started it are the prelude to an even stranger chapter I'm still awakening in. No pun. I've never been a fan of melodrama, but I can't help feeling like I missed life's chance. Derailing onto the wrong track one night out, my train now headed in another direction. After being the conductor my whole life, I've become a passenger, seeing where each day goes. I don't know where this new ride leads. I can still write, but lost the ability to be succinct, as I have to say words in my head. It's all sea change. The harder they come, the harder they fall. The happy-go-lucky me of December 2023 has become a distant character in a film I miss. Every moment radiates from the past. Through the fog of time between then and now, it's a miracle and a curse that I made it. January 12th will permanently mark in some way the last day of my life. My night of party drugs may rank among the most life-changing neurotoxic stories of all time. I'm the exception, not the rule. But I'm not the only one. The world is full of terrified people with lasting insomnia from taking pills. Here's one, here's another. And the OP linked 2 different articles of people and people on Reddit that this exact same thing happened to them. And very scary that, this isn't the only person. But the OP continues saying, all variations of a theme. Most get shot down by the mob who doubt a drug they love could do so much damage. You can't understand until it happens to you. I've since discovered so many lives broken by this chemical's dark side. If you look up NIH case reports, you'll find permanent anxiety disorders and intraceable psychosis brought on by even one-time pill use in otherwise healthy people, as I was. If you search blogs for long-term come down, LTH, there are troves of devastating accounts of roles creating neurosis lasting months, years, forever. People from around the world have contacted me to share heart-wrenching life turns. My case is exceptional, like Dr. Early said, 1 in a million. But if I had any idea I was playing the lottery, even at 1 in a billion odds, even a trillion, I would have never taken the cap handed to me. I love life too much to risk it. What hit my brain eventually took away the best parts of me. I can't make sense of it, nor will I ever. I'll also always wonder what good was waiting just around the corner if I'd only taken the other turn that night. It's too much to think about. I don't understand fate, but I didn't deserve this. No one does. For 999,999 people out there, since chances are slim you'll soon forget my story. I would have too. Before that night, I never worried. Didn't know the first thing about meds, the brain, or drugs. Never stressed. I was living a charmed life and got lucky at each turn. Everything worked. That was my world for 42 unforgettable years. But for the next 1 in a million, maybe, my tale gives pause before plugging in chemicals with the power to reshape a mind. We each make our own choices, but from where I now stand in its abyss, the mind is too fragile to toy with. It's our universe, so it feels permanent, like the sun because it surrounds us. But we don't understand this universe, let alone what can throw off its axis and rotation for good. I learned too late. I wish I never had this story to tell. It's a what if reel I've replayed so much that the film is burned. Nobody said it was easy, but nobody said it would be this hard. Oh, take me back to the start. I can't change the past, but my story can change someone else's future. Did the system fail me? No. No, in that the pill put the writing on the wall. That was my choice, and while it may soon be legal in a bunch of countries, Mexico is not one. Ironically, the same morning, January 12th, Mexican authorities seized on arrival a CBD lip balm from my toiletry bag received on my birthday, 3 days before, bought over the counter in DC, so there's no consensus on what's safe. No, in that I was treated by countless compassionate doctors who did the best they could. Too many to name. Most importantly, no. In that no neurobiologist on Earth understands the human brain. Brain science is at best presumption. So how can any doctor be faulted for not finding my silver bullet? Did the system fail? Yes. Believe it or not, the pill was first synthesized by Merck Pharmaceuticals, owner of the same patented drugs I'd later take to fight its damage. There's a saying, you break it, you buy it. Yes, in that the very medicines prescribed to give me life-preserving sleep gave me life-destroying depression. Yes, in that nurses at a high-end facility loaned me a 14-foot cable, knowing I was approaching the breaking point from no sleep. Had that arrived in my bags, it would have been confiscated. My doctor there getting fired 3 days later is a smoking gun. Yes, in that I turned myself into an ER in self-induced anoxia, only to be assigned a room beside an unlocked 6-story stairwell, when an entire trap-proof floor existed for patients experiencing delirium. My story is worth telling it for no other reason than the question that intersects here across medicine, policy, pharma, drugs, health, and brain science. But none of these questions matter to me now. I wasn't thinking about any of them as I sat on the log, rolling back the reel of time. I was remembering the people and places I love, the stories told. Now, how to move on. As a kid, my older brother was the daredevil between us. He led me down our steep driveway on a Powell Peralta skateboard. We got marooned on a jungle island in the Arabian Sea, and he showed me how to shoot BB guns and bottled rockets, climb 20-story cranes, and draft down San Francisco hills at high speed on a road bike. He taught me how to shotgun beer, how to chop drugs, and using rolled bills from summer lifeguarding blow booger sugar. How did I survive so many wild nights unscathed, but not his 50th? He's done 1,000 times the drugs. Why me? We still haven't spoken, but I forgave him. It's not his fault. Even Discretion couldn't imagine what lay ahead. I was always loyal to my company and the people I share it with. They've also been loyal for so long, flying the plane, waiting to return, and never giving up hope. The last thing left to face is my heart. I've been drawn to water and rocks forever. Some of my earliest memories are collecting pebbles on the beach and moving stones in a creek near my house. Today, the two places I love most on earth, my cottage and the site of my future home, are both wrapped in rock walls and rippling waves. I learned this world from a hermit. Growing up, I spent summers at a neighborhood swim and tennis club set on woods beside the Potomac River. Each day, I'd see a reclusive man with long gray hair enter the neighborhood forest, stark naked, and walk a path only he knew to be tucked away cove. For as long as anyone could remember, he'd been building a half-mile-long dam out of stones by hand in the rapids that, across decades, single-handedly redirected the course of one of America's most famed waterways. To this day, his handiwork is visible on Google Earth, just west of the American Legion Bridge. Legend had it that crazy old Ned was stuck in his infinite loop from a bad drug trip that broke him, like PBS's strange case of the frozen addicts. Looking back, Ned's appearance in the haze of my childhood now seems almost a biblical omen. This Sisyphus, cursed by a pill to push rocks against the current forever. A Halley's Comet sent to me as a warning from the stars, but I never saw the sign. And now the stars, even Carlsvagon, have gone out. There's no place left to hide from my heart in the ensuing darkness. Coming up on the anniversary of the first night that started all the sleeplessness ones to follow, I keep thinking back to this time last year, healthy and strong, chemical-free, soundly sober, my world in motion, a new moon rising, crisscrossing, shimmering sea waves, embarking on what I thought was becoming like a lightning strike, the brightest chapter of my life. I'd always heard, from the brightest day comes the darkest night. Now I know. One tiny pill I barely remember taking broke my night's world, head, and heart in that order. This December, each carol echoes a bittersweet memento to the final weeks of Shining Eyes 1 year ago, before my story began. I miss those Advent nights like you can't imagine. Last year's nocturnes were the shooting stars of a light-filled universe, set ablaze, then vanquished. I'll never get those starbursts back. My heart light, the shining eyes, or why they slipped away. Here's hoping ECT erases all the memories, like eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. Meet me in Montauk. Until then, red wine and sleeping pills help me get back. Maybe I will see you in the next life. On December 15th, 2024, with my brain unchanged from the state it was left in by my fall 6 months before, with my mind's eye gone and my world blurry from deviated eyes and a broken mind and heart, with each passing increasingly dragged down by the weight of the January 12th anniversary fast approaching that would mark the start of a second year in the rest of my life in hell. Remembering the health and happiness I still had the year before, a relentless sorrow kept pulling me down. Like Sebastian's gray horse sinking into the swamp of sadness in the never-ending story, eventually all of me disappeared into the quicksand. I played what I thought would be my last notes at the piano, walked out of the house and sat on a fallen tree in the adjacent woods, trying to accept what was to come. I begged whatever power had cursed me to let the ones I was leaving behind find peace again someday. Then I swallowed 4 grams of some substance, 2 times the fatal dose, washing it down with wine. Either miraculously or like a demonic possession, before blacking out, I unconsciously stumbled home through the forest, completely blind from the chemicals, lunging into trees and walls I couldn't see and walking into windows. I ended up curled in a ball on a bathroom floor, which is where I was found and intubated, pumped full of bicarbonate and charcoal to try to save my blood and heart as I slipped into a coma. 3 days later, I awoke in the ICU, with a giant tube down my throat. I spent Christmas in that hospital and eventually managed to make it through the first anniversary of the night that launched this story. But it hasn't gotten any easier, only harder, because the consciousness that returned since my OD is partial. My mind is slower, my vision blurrier, my heart more gone. If there's a lesson in my tale, it's that when you think it can't get worse, it can, because it happened 3 times. There is no end to my never-ending story, only ongoing despair. I was once a well-tuned car, cared for, maintained, navigating the twists and turns of life's road. Today, I'm a head-on car crash passed by others on the highway. Pinned, paralyzed, trapped in wreckage I can't escape, despite all I've done to try to. If there is an out other than what my burnt-out heart tells me is the only way, I can't see it. I can't see anything. It's all black in here. Clutching the wheel of an engine that hasn't worked in 13 months. Hoping against hope that if I keep pressing the pedal, someday the motor will catch and my life will turn back on. And I'm back after like 5 minutes of sitting in silence. I was truly moved, and I don't know like what word even sums up like the feelings that just radiate from that story and that gave me. That truly was the most emotional story I've ever read. I have read thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of posts on Reddit and stories and just my own personal reading and watching movie. I've never seen or read something that was that emotionally impacting to me. That story of having it all. I mean, they outlined how they had it all. They had the money, they had the houses, they had the family, they had the love. And they lost it all due to one freak accident of taking a pill. And I just don't know what else to say. I mean, this was truly one of the most insane stories I've ever read. And I'm sorry for just yapping, but I mean, I truly just need to speak to even begin to process the story. Because, you know, with a story, most of the time, it ends with a light at the end of the tunnel. And in this video, I will mention there is light at like most of the time. I've always mentioned like, oh, don't worry, keep going. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. But for the OP here, like they literally don't have a light at the end of the tunnel because their brain is messed up to a point where it can't get better. And that is just so disheartening to me because I would like to think of myself as like a forever optimist, like the OP said. But to know it won't ever get better is horrifying. It truly is horrifying. This is a long story. I mean, this story was like 40 minutes long, but like this could be like a movie almost. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but this truly was the most moving and insane and emotional story I have ever read in my life. And it all stemmed from one pill. And a lot of people in the comments, you know, commend the OP. And I have to as well. The writing was impeccable. The OP is an extremely talented writer, obviously. I mean, just with how, like, the comparison, I mean, like, think back to, like, the story or, like, the example of the OP when they were a kid and saw the one guy that kept building the rock bridge in the river because of a drug-induced kind of psychosis almost. Like, that truly is like a biblical comparison. I mean, like, this was just such an insane story, like, from the start to the end. Like, I just don't even know how to process. This will stick with me for, like, honestly, probably the rest of my life, this story. Even though it's some random person on the internet who's sharing this story, I just was so moved, and I felt like I knew the OP by the end of it almost. I'm sure a lot of you listening right now are tired of listening to me talk, but I mean, I'm sure you feel a similar way. This truly was just a very moving story, and I was honestly just emotional by the end of it because I don't even know what to say. But that was a insane story and confession, and I just really hope the OP is doing better now. The OP has continued posting up until 3 months ago, so luckily the OP is at least still around up until 3 months ago. I don't know what else to say in recent times, but if somehow the OP sees this, email me, reach out. I mean, I know you've talked to a ton of people, but I'm here to talk if you need it. But, and so, same with anyone else who's going through something. I mean, if you're going through anything similar, reach out. I mean, even if it can't get better, like talking to someone always helps. But yeah, insane story. On to the next one. I was attracted to young people for a number of years, and it ruined my life. And I'm sorry I have to use that substitute in here, but YouTube doesn't like me saying attraction with child. This is one of those stories. Yeah. So I will be using substitutes when necessary, but you get the gist. I'm trying to be as respectful as possible, but yeah, I just have to. Anyways, onto the post. I wanted to say from the beginning that I have never touched or hurt a young person, and never will. Obvious throwaway for obvious reasons. How it all began was when I was around 15 or so. I started to become attracted to girls around me. I went into puberty very late. As I grew older, instead of my attractions growing in accordance with my age, they never moved, which led me to continually be attracted to girls of that age. When I was a minor, it wasn't such a big issue, but when I became an adult, it was. When I turned 19, I made the decision to essentially become a recluse. I did not want to hurt anyone, but there were so many emotions fighting inside of me. I had urges that I had little control of, and it was a mission every day to avoid following through on them. It came to a head one day when I was speaking to the daughter of a friend, and the urges almost overwhelmed me. I almost broke. This was the point when I shut myself away. I would only go out when I knew that young people were at school or wouldn't be on the street after dark. I avoided media involving young people. I avoided books involving young people. Most days I wouldn't go out at all, only going out after dark, if at all. I took jobs where I could work the night shift so that I didn't have to have any contact with young people. This made my life absolute hell. I became a nervous wreck. I would get anxiety if anyone came to the door in case it was a young person. I still worked, but my performance was poor. This often led to me being fired or disciplined. No one else knew what I was going through. By necessity, it was something I had to endure alone. Around 7 years ago, I found a psychologist. It had gotten to be too much and I had to speak with someone about it. Over the course of the next 6 months, we discovered that my feelings were brought about by me being SA'd very young. When it was happening, it was frequent and often violent. As it turns out, I had repressed most of it. I didn't know how bad it actually was. However, discovering this led to that revelation. Over the course of 3 years of twice weekly treatments, my feelings towards young people began to fade. Slowly but surely, I started to get better. I owe my psychologist my life, literally. I was at the point of S-word before I started seeing him. Now, 7 years later, I have no attraction towards young people. I have a much more normal life. I can actually go out during the day without being anxious. I can talk to young people with no urges. I am mostly normal. I'm still dealing with the repercussions of my dark times, but the dark times themselves are over. I'm married and I have a baby boy on the way. The process of getting treatment is so freeing. I can't even describe it now. My psychologist is the one who suggested writing this out. He thinks it will help with my healing process. I hope it will. Thanks for listening. And wow, that was a hell of a confession, but I mean, props to this guy for getting help and, not giving in to the urges, because God knows so many people do. With how many predator catching videos there is, there's a limitless amount of people like this out there that do act upon their urges. So major props to this guy for not giving into it and, fixing himself, because I think a lot of people kind of hide these urges and then they don't really do anything about it until something horrible happens. And yeah, most of the time, a lot of these people feeling this way or attraction towards young people were, subjected to abuse when they were younger. And so I think it is important to get help if you did experience something like that, so none of these urges come out in unhealthy ways, if that makes sense. But, props to this guy for getting help. I'm glad he has a wife now. I'm glad he has a family. Hopefully he has a great job. But that could have ended really badly. But I'm super glad this guy fought the demons, literally, and got better. Major props to that guy, and I hope he continues to get better. And hopefully, if anyone's watching out there and you have some sort of attraction towards whatever, then there is help out there. And very interesting confession. On to the next one. I almost strangled my mother to death when I was 15. Reposting this here instead of an r/off my chest because this sub seems a little bit more fitting. I've been browsing off my chest in this subreddit for a few hours now since I couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well chip in with my story, since I don't often talk about this in real life for obvious reasons. Please mind that English is not my native language. As you can guess from the title, it's not a very happy story. Buckle up, this will be a long ride. My parents broke up very early. I grew up with my mom. My dad wasn't really present throughout my childhood. My mother has had a drinking problem for as long as I can remember. She had a rough upbringing and could only vent her frustration when she was drunk. The way things went down was always the same. Around once a month, she comes home late, waking me in the middle of the night, and from then on, it's a shit show. She starts yelling, spitting at me, beating me, smears her snot on my face or on my bed sheets and makes me sleep in there. One second, she yells in my face that she hates me, that my father and grandma hate me, that it's all my fault, and in the next second, she starts crying and says that she loves me. An emotional roller coaster. This always goes on for the whole night. I don't remember too much, but ironically, the most prominent memories are the ones from when I was very young, maybe around 5 or something. One night, I had to stand facing the wall the whole night while she screamed at me. I was so tired since I was just a little kid, but every time I tried to sit down, she would hit me. Sometimes I had to do squats while pulling at my ears, making me look really stupid. Apart from the fact that it was humiliating, she made me do them until I collapsed from the pain. Then she shouted at me to continue. A weird thing she did was she frequently pretended to choke to death in the middle of a rant. And then she'd lay there motionless for 10 minutes straight. As a 5-year-old, I was completely in panic and had no idea what to do. I tried to wake her up, but she didn't respond at all until she suddenly jerked up and resumed shouting at me and hitting me for not helping her. Luckily, she stopped pulling that one once she saw that I got too used to it. As I got older, she got more and more violent. But the only times I was really scared for my life was when she got the kitchen knife while fighting with her now ex-fiancé. Luckily, no one was stabbed. I could go on, but you get the idea. I never got any help because I was so used to all this stuff. And of course, my mother told me to never tell anyone. Whenever I brought her behavior up in the next morning, she claimed that she couldn't remember, said that I'm over-exaggerating things, or outright claimed I was making stuff up. Sometimes she apologized. "I will never do it again, honey." I stopped listening after a while. School was pretty shit as well. I had no social skills because I preferred to play video games all day. I was a weird and misbehaving kid, so I was bullied a lot. Also, I was too afraid to stand up for myself because I only knew punishment. The fact that we often moved didn't help much. All in all, I went to 10 different elementary schools across 4 different countries. Poland was especially shit. Not the country. You Polish folk are nice people, but living with this rich alcoholic dude whom my mother constantly fought with. Thank God that episode only lasted a few months. Anyway, I digress. Unsurprisingly, I became depressed at some point and have been ever since. Don't know when exactly. I think it was somewhere around 10 years old. This torture went on for many years. Then it happened. She came home drunk one morning while I was getting ready for school. She didn't get much of a reaction out of me these days and then didn't seem to like it. As mentioned in the title, I was 15 years old at the time and getting physically stronger than her, and I was used to the shouting. Also, I was basically dead inside. I was completely nonchalant when she started her rant. Then she said something about my ex-girlfriend. It wasn't really all that bad, but it was a weak spot for me since she recently broke up with me. It was my first relationship, and I was the one who fucked it up. It was the last straw. All these fucking years of constant abuse and neglect unloaded themselves in one moment. Humans can be animals. It was like watching a movie from a third-person perspective. I had no control whatsoever. I screamed while grabbing her throat and squeezing with all I had. I somehow strangled her across my room onto the bed. My big and scary mother, whom I was always afraid of, wasn't able to fight back against my rage. Not one bit. Now thinking back, she even looked kind of scared. So she was on her back of my bed and I was standing above her, squeezing her throat. I have no idea how long that went on. Maybe a few seconds, maybe half a minute. Everything felt so surreal. At some point, my brain kicks in. Do you really want to do that? I got a hold of myself and I let go of her. Fucking mistake. She instantly grabs a chair and starts swinging at me full force. I mean, yeah, I technically tried to kill her, but now I just want to get out of this alive. I block it and fucks up my arm. Then she bites me in the very same arm. Jesus Christ, that hurt. The bite later swelled to the size of a ping pong ball. Anyway, I managed to get the hell out of the apartment, but now I run the risk of freezing to death since we had winter and I'm wounded with nothing on me but my pajamas. I encounter a neighbor and ask him to call the cops. I tell them what happened, leaving out the strangling part, and after they see my wounds, they inform my mother that I'm being taken into care. My mom makes a pathetic attempt of trying to put on an act, but snaps halfway through and bites an officer, gets wrestled down and arrested on the spot. It was honestly hilarious in hindsight. She played the victim and called me a traitor for calling the cops on her, but got out later on. She had to pay a huge fine, though, for attacking an officer. I moved out into government care. It was honestly cool. By the end of age 15, I had my own apartment for free rent, 400 euros per month to do with whatever the hell I want, and social workers that were pretty decent people. Kudos to German CPS. However, shit caught up with me. My depression worsened badly, I started to drink a lot, and later that year I tried to drown myself. That was rock bottom for me. I've had bad phases since then. There were nights where I wanted to die, nights where I wanted to pay my mother a visit and get my revenge, and nights where I didn't want anything at all. However, all in all, life's been gradually improving for me. Slowly but steadily. The older I got, the more self-aware I became about my behavior, so I stopped getting bullied. Also, I learned to stand up for myself. That was helpful. However, I still ended up quitting school at some point. I realized I can't force myself to do something I despise for even a second. I just stood up in the middle of the class and went, fuck it. After that, I tried a bunch of different jobs, but none of them worked for me. However, I found my true passion. I love making music, and I'm currently putting all my energy into becoming a successful musician. I no longer care if I might fail. It's really liberating. My relationship with my mother has been improving steadily as well. Boy, it was hard at first. And I made sure to let her know how much I hated her for what she did. But she finally, truly admitted her mistakes and quit drinking. It was easier after that. I could start expressing and letting go of my hatred in a healthy way. She really made an effort to better herself. I also apologized for what I did that day and she forgave me. I wish I could tell you a happy ending to that part of the story, but sadly, my mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia 2 years ago. The stress of coming to terms with that, she did, and the loneliness probably broke her. Sometimes I think about what I could have done differently. She knows that I still haven't forgiven her and I am still suffering every day because of what happened. But I can't change that. I told her it needs time. It's been only 6 years since the day the police took me. She's back in her home country now with her family. They are taking care of her. Thank God for that. The last 2 years were a huge burden. At one point, she was so thin that you could see the shape of her skull, all while having that giddy, delusional smile on her face. Horrifying. Well, there it is. The story of how I tried to kill my mother. I apologize for the swearing. I got a bit emotional while writing this. Granted, a lot of bad stuff happened in the past, but it made me the way I am today. And I'm glad for that. I learned many things and wouldn't trade that for the world. People become who they are based on circumstances, but it is always in our power to change our fate. Don't hate them, no matter what they did to you. Cruel people are often hurting inside. Instead, encourage them to be the best they can be. Life's too short to be unhappy. Strive towards your goals and never settle for less. It could always be your last day on earth. You literally have nothing to lose. Life's definitely not fair. Cherish what you've been given and make the best of it. S-word will prevent you from ever becoming happy. However, I realize I'm still only 21 years old and have a lot to learn. I plan on doing so. I don't want to live a life full of hatred and regret. I want to be able to love and trust somebody again. I want to get married, have at least 3 children, become a successful musician, travel the world, stuff like that. Just be happy. I know I'll get there. One day at a time. I think the OP summed up that last part so well, saying life's too short to be unhappy, and I have to completely agree with that. I'm glad the OP is doing better now, it seems. And they did give an update in the comments. The OP gave an update in the comments saying that her mother is on medication now for her schizophrenia and doing much, much better, which is just a heartwarming story. But, you know, it was horrifying that the OP had to go through that during her childhood or during the childhood. And, yeah, I mean, almost killed their mother. That's terrifying. That's horrifying. And it's so sad that the OP had to go through that for so many years. And I think this is just a great testament to everyone watching. If you're going through something similar or, you know, just anything where you don't think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, there always is. And I think this story and post is a great testament to that. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Things will always get better. And just try to look at everything with a positive lens over it. Because, you know, perception and the way you view things is everything. So just try to make the most of every day because, like the OP said as well, you never know which day might be your last. And I hope you guys are doing well. I hope the OP is doing well. I hope the OP's mother's doing well. It's been 7 years since that post and not a lot of updates regarding that. So I just have to wish the OP and their mother the best. On to the next one. I once pushed an elderly lady down the stairs because she noticed me and my friends do something bad. So when I was young and stupid, me and my 2 friends went out every day to do dumb stuff, such as knock and run and trespassing, breaking stuff that wasn't ours, disturbing the peace, etc. It was December 2017 when me and my friends went out to the local neighborhood to run around different flats and knock on people's doors or do some other shit that basically made people go mad. And one of my friends decided to start throwing bricks at a street lamp for fun. We thought it's all good because it was dark and there was no one on the street. After he was done, we went to get something to drink and got into a flat to get warmer because it was a snowy winter. 10 minutes in, we noticed a lady 2 floors above us that was speaking to someone on the phone about some thugs running around and breaking stuff. We got scared that she might have noticed us and maybe even recorded the whole action. We went upstairs to make sure that she wasn't talking about us, but turned out she was on the phone with her son when she saw us come up and quickly cut our way back down off speaking to her son. Come on, quicker, they're here. We were already shitting ourselves and had no idea what to do. The lady was about 60 to 70 years old, so we didn't want to do anything that could hurt her, but before any other thoughts, I rammed her and she fell down a couple stairs shouting at us. We ran straight down and out of the building. When we started running through the flat, I looked back to see if she was okay. She looked fine at me, so we escaped. I don't know where she is today, and I hope she's alive and well. I regret it because it must have hurt her. I'm sorry, lady. I learned from my mistakes and got some better friends now. I'm now almost 18 years old and surrounded by better people and know how to do good. And I'm a changed person, but I won't forgive myself for hurting an elder. And now let's get into some comments, and these comments are not supportive of the guy at all, which totally makes sense, but let's get into them. You know, at that age, a small injury could spiral into something life-destroying, and I totally agree. Someone else says, yep, my grandma fell down a few stairs, had to be put under for hip surgery. The anesthesia really kicked her dementia into overdrive and was never the same after being put under. Older women in general are prone to a lot of damage from a fall due to a lower bone density post-menopause. Someone else says, once an elderly person breaks their hip, the clock starts running. It's sad, but true. Someone else replies to that saying, that's what happened to my grandma. She broke her hip and pelvis, took a sharp decline, and then died. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the comments. A lot of people are saying like they know an older person that not this exact scenario happened, but they fell and they're never really the same because, I mean, old people are very, very fragile. Someone else says, oh, fuck. She was probably so scared, and that outcome was exactly what she was scared of. That made me sad, and I just have to agree. I mean, I can't imagine that being my mom or my grandma and some asshole pushes them over. I mean, I am calling the OP an asshole. Hopefully, the OP has learned from his mistakes and not done anything similar to that since, but yeah, very sad story. Very, I mean, honestly, horrifying story because who knows what happened to that older lady. 60 to 70 years old is not young at all. In a bad fall, especially down a few stairs, he said, that could be life-ruining. I mean, literally life-ruining. Someone else says, my grandma dropped a can on her foot and broke her foot. That was the beginning of the end for her. By the time she recovered from the broken foot, she'd lost a lot of independence and her mind started to go. Someone else says, the same happened to my grandma, but in her case, she broke her hip. She obviously couldn't walk during her recovery, and by the time the hip healed, she couldn't stand up anymore due to such a long time resting. That was also her beginning of the end. Before all of this, she was totally independent. It's honestly scary how fast your quality of life and lifespan can change when you pass a certain age. And yeah, this is just, reading all these comments has kind of scared me because who knows what happened to the person the OP pushed over. I mean, it literally could have ruined her life by becoming injured, and it also leads the lady to not be trusting of any strangers. Not only does it physically hurt her, but I can't even imagine the mental stress she has to go through. She probably never wanted to go outside anymore because she's like, I mean, who knows? Some asshole could go push me over. You know, I feel so bad for the lady the OP pushed over. Hopefully the OP feels bad. Hopefully the OP has, moved forward from this and, truly learned and feels regretful because, yeah, that was just a really rough confession to read because who knows what happened to that lady. I just hope she's doing better now. I sold drugs at university to get by and ruined my life. Before I started university, the main thing highlighted by my parents and everyone else was the financial side. The loan I was granted for university wasn't going to be anywhere near enough to cover my expenses and my rent, but I lied to my parents to keep them from stressing that I'd get a job and sort it out myself. I tried finding a job online over the summer before moving to uni in a city an hour away, but 4 months and no luck. I then went to a festival at the end of the summer and took my friend's advice on selling a little bit of Zaza and a few other things to people in there to start a little saving to take with me. All I was worried about was having to rely on my parents when they already supported my sister and are going through a very tough time financially. I made quite a bit, and this made me think I should do it more to other students to help me get by, as a lot of people I knew did it and paid off a lot while in uni. So I moved away, started selling, and life was good. I always made sure people were safe. No one ever had any issues at all, so I was good. My first year at university was a success, and I was able to help my parents out too with some money and not having to ask them for anything. As the eldest son, it's my job to provide, not take, and I didn't care how I was doing it. I wasn't hurting anyone, and it wasn't bothering anyone. The second year went well. I made enough to help my friend who was also struggling and was able to do a lot more for my family with my life than I was ever able to do before, and I was happy. The summer came around, and I was sick of it now. I hated always looking over my shoulder. That was the only thing that got to me. I knew I wasn't harming anyone or causing an issue, so I saw no problem besides the stress and the anxiety it gave me, so I decided to quit after one last time. Over the course of the last 2 years, I had made a lot of friends and connections through selling, but not about drugs, but more towards creative ideas and other people like myself, which in the end helped me realize what I wanted to do in my life, and this summer was going to be the end of this. and I was finally going to get my shit together and do what I felt was right. So I went to this festival. I'm enjoying myself, and on the second day, I was caught by security through someone snitching on me. I was arrested at the festival, totally strip searched, and then taken to a custody center an hour away with no phone, money, or ID, as they took it all away from me and kept it as evidence. After spending 28 hours in a cell with nothing but one tuna sandwich given to me, I was then given a solicitor and interviewed. From that moment, I knew my life was over. I was interviewed and made clear of what was going to happen, and I had lost everything from this when I was so close to leaving it all behind. I'm currently under investigation and free without bail, but I've been told I'm looking at 6 to 8 years, all for this stupid mistake I should have never done. I was caught with an ounce of booger sugar, an ounce of Zaza, 150 pills, an ounce of K, and 1 ounce of another substance, all bagged up to sell with a cash amount of just shy of $3 grand and my phone with evidence. I'm not proud of any of this. I just say it all to give you an idea of what I had. Since then, my life has been ruined. Unable to go back to university because I have no idea when I'll be called to court, so my life is in literal limbo. My friends are hurt, but it's shown me who my real friends are, especially in a time of need, but most of all, my family are hurt more than anything. No one besides my mom, dad, and sister and my family know, and we intend to keep it a secret from the rest of our family, as we don't want to hurt them too, and this kills me. Knowing I'll be gone for so long and my family will change their opinion on me from the eldest son and pride of the whole family to a failure drug dealer who's ruined his life. I would do or give anything to go back to the beginning of this year and change all of this, to sort my life out early and avoid any of this. Sadly, it's not that easy, and now I have to do my time for my mistakes. I just wish it could all be so different. I hope if you're reading this, it changes your mind from doing any of this. I thought I was never going to get caught, but one way or another, it takes 1 second for your whole life to be turned upside down. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, I don't think you can say no one got hurt when you're dealing booger sugar. Drugs don't have a clean supply chain, and I'm pretty sure some people got hurt. That said, that's a shitty sentence for someone down the food chain. And then someone replied to this saying, with the amount on him, he's exactly the person they're looking to catch. He's not some guy just selling to his friends. Someone else replies to that saying, I was going to say exactly this. If it was just Zaza, all right. Maybe you're not hurting anyone. But that's a shit ton of drugs. Even if other people brought more, OP still brought in way too much to fall under the not hurting anybody category. Those are some hard drugs, and I very much doubt that OP can guarantee the safety of those to whom he distributes. I had a friend die from H laced with fentanyl. Even if OP source is good, there's always a chance someone fucks up and OP ends up responsible for the deaths of others. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't help but feel for the OP at the end. I mean, yes, he totally could have hurt somebody like the comments outlined, but I mean, you can just tell how remorseful he is and just how deeply he regrets it, saying like, I never thought I was going to get caught, and I wish I could just go back. I mean, you can just hear the regret in the, just remorse in his like voice or just his text. And this was posted 7 years ago. So when he posted this, he said he's looking to 6 to 8 years. So who knows? Maybe OP will come back to this account sometime within the next year or so and say, hey, I just did 6 to 8 years in prison. That's crazy. OP's life changed so much from when he first posted this, and I just have to assume he's been in prison this entire time, which is crazy. But that'd be very interesting if we got an update from the OP. And I just hope the OP is all right. But that's a pretty crazy story, especially before his sentencing. I mean, I can't imagine the anxiety he felt. I mean, he's like, I'm just stuck in a limbo. I'm not in school anymore, and I just don't know when I'm going to be called to court, and boom, I'm in jail. And that's just a crazy confession. On to the next one. I gave my friend a fatal dose of H, and it still haunts me. I did time in jail. I went to therapy, and I sought forgiveness from her family. I worked on myself, I went to rehab, I'm now 6 years sober. I warned the youth about the dangers of drugs, but I still remember that night vividly. Her birthday is coming up, and that's when the guilt intensifies. I've thought about S-word before. I took a life, and I was a worthless piece of shit, so I deserve to die. I know I didn't cause her addiction. It's possible she would have OD'd without my help, but it doesn't matter because in this reality, I was the one who did it, and I will never not feel guilty about it. And damn, that was a short, heavy confession. That's all that was written from the OP. And after going to the OP's account was banned. So we don't know what happened to the OP. I hope the OP is doing better now, but there's no way to know. And I just saw one of the top comments that's good for everyone listening if you're ever in a situation. And the comment reads as follows. Just a tip for those who might be in this situation in the future. A few states in the US have a law that protects you and anybody trying to save someone who just OD'd, even if he took the drugs as well. You can be high as a kite and still be protected by the law if you took the initiative to save their life. And I think that is a great PSA for everyone watching. So if you are ever in a situation, a horrible situation like the OP described, you don't need to be worried about getting in trouble by the law because, I mean, number one, you just shouldn't be worried about that anyways. It's more worth it to save a human life, but you will be, exempt from the law if you save someone. And yeah, that's just a heavy confession. And I hope the OP's doing better now, but we haven't heard anything in a long, long time. And I don't know how we would. So that's just a crazy, dark, and sad confession. On to the next one. I kicked a hitchhiker out of my car in the middle of the desert. About 8 months ago, I was driving alone on a trip to visit my parents. Most of this drive goes through a desolate desert with barely any vegetation. Approximately an hour into the drive, I saw a 20 to 30-year-old with shorts, t-shirt, backpack, and a water bottle giving me the thumbs up on the side of the road. Considering the road is less used nowadays, I decided to help him out because it didn't seem like he would see anyone else that day. At first, he seemed quite normal at first, but after we introduced each other and had a couple conversations, he started to act strangely. He would occasionally flick his head twice and make a face, but would continue with the conversation like nothing happened. About 30 minutes after driving him, he started talking politics and was very adamant on his way of viewing things being correct. I wasn't afraid of sharing my own thoughts and opinions, so I did as respectfully as I could. Without warning, he cut me off mid-sentence and screamed at the top of his lungs. I was shocked and really didn't know what to do. Looking back, he was obviously on drugs. He pushed me past the point of comfort in my own vehicle at that point, so I pulled over and ordered him to get out of my car. He took his stuff, and once outside, I zoomed away, leaving him at least 30 kilometers away from the nearest town. Later, when I arrived at my parents' house, I looked over to the passenger side door, and he left his water bottle. I assume he was fine, but who knows? Maybe I killed some druggie because I didn't look to my right for a couple hours. I've spent $250,000 to $350,000 on drugs and gambling. I used to make a lot of money in my early 20s as a manager of a body shop grossing $4 to $10 million a year in profit. My boss was an opioid addict and got me into taking them from long hours and pain. Next thing you know, it's a year later and I'm hooked. The next 4 years was us snorting and smoking all day, which was about $250 to $500 a day. That's not including any gambling or any other drugs we used like booger sugar, pills, weed, psych, etc. I would bring home $2 to $4 grand a week, depending on commission, and then spend half of it at the casino and the other half up my nose. It ended up with me ODing. I flatlined twice. Had 52 minutes of chest compressions performed to keep me alive while they Narcaned me 3 times up my nose, and then through my intubation tube at the hospital. I spent a week in a coma, 2 more in the ICU, 1 more in recovery, and then a month after that learning to walk again. They even flew a rotoprone bed in for me alone to get brain activity going the first 24 hours. The real confession is what else we did during those 4 or 5 years. We paid off a half dozen adjusters to inflate claims/supplements. I mean, thousands of dollars each time. A total of $500,000 I know of was scammed money. We would take a hail car that had medium damage and use tools to create more dents for more money and fix them before the customer saw, and somehow never got caught. I've been clean 5 years and started a family. I'm doing wonderful. My boss just died last week of an OD. I haven't seen or spoke to him since I quit when I decided to get sober after my OD, but hearing about his death brought a lot up. Honestly, it got much darker and illegal than that, but I'm wary of posting those details online ever. And then he makes an edit saying, about 12 hours later, this post has garnered more traffic than I expected by a long shot. I wrote this because my boss died, and I found out through the grapevine. I haven't worked or spoken to him in 5 years, but it still brings up a lot. The last 5 years, my life has been 110% different. I work now in the low voltage industry. I don't make a fraction of the money I used to, but I have the greatest family in the world. I'm sober and much happier. 90% of the comments were beyond positive, which was surprising, considering I figured all would be shitty about the fraud and prospects of much darker days than that. But thank you guys. And to those struggling with addiction, there is hope. I'd given up to my poison and decided that was going to have to do for the rest of my life, but I was wrong. I couldn't even move out of bed without H. What I recommended is to do whatever is necessary for sobriety. Suboxone, do it. Crisis lines, call them. Rehab, if you can afford it, go. But worst case, they have psychiatric and drug addiction places strictly in the medical field that can help speed up withdrawals through drugs and get you out faster and back to life. But above all, have someone to keep you accountable. You cannot do it alone. You need a system like NA or someone to help guide you during such a drastic change to life. But I went from scum of the earth to dad of the year. I work 60 hours a week to make sure my kids and fiance are cared for and loved beyond belief. Anything you all have wanted to do is possible. Best wishes and best of luck to you all. And I'm just glad the OP is doing better now. It's a crazy story. Some people had some jokes in the comments saying he's the wolf of Body Shop Street or the Wolf of Wall Street or Car Street, which is kind of a funny reference. But everyone is just like, wow. And I wonder what the guy did that's more dark and too dark for him to share, but I'm glad he's doing better now. And yeah, that's just a crazy story. It's great he got out alive, unlike his boss. But yeah, rest in peace to his boss, and hopefully this OP can stay sober and stay safe. And I like the last words he added on, saying anything is possible. You can get sober. You can put your life back together. It's never too late. My friend of 20 years was arrested for cheese pizza. And I understand how much you guys hate me using the acronym for cheese pizza, but I have to. I can't say any of the other ones. I read every single comment about it, so, with you guys giving me suggestions, and I understand it's not, cheese pizza isn't respectful at all, but I just have to say that for the video for YouTube. I'm sorry, but anyways, let's continue. This is a super rambling mess of a post in an attempt to vent my anger. I found out that my best friend of 20 years was arrested for cheese pizza, and he fully confessed to it too. Not just that he had it, but was also distributing it. On top of that, it has been going on for years, completely unbeknownst to anyone. I'm just sitting here in complete shock and horror. This person, and been the closest thing I have ever had to a brother in my life. He was the best man at my wedding. His parents were my support during my parents' divorce. My father would joke about how he was a bonus son, just to find out he is a monster. Needless to say, he is dead to me. I keep wishing he had just committed S-word. I'm sick now, knowing what he was doing behind everyone's backs, just so he could get off to the worst possible fantasies a human could have. He was to be the uncle to my kids. Instead, he was destroying lives for his own pleasure. I've never been so angry as I am now. If given the chance, I would kill him for what he has done. I feel so stupid for not seeing this sooner. My wife says there was nothing I could have done. The only peace I have is he got caught. I just want to rant. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, you knew and were best friends with one version of him, the version he presented to the world. You didn't know, and you couldn't have known, unless he confessed to you 20 years ago and you promised to keep a secret from him, which clearly you did not. Then you're blameless for this. Be kind to yourself. The monster within was hidden from view. His victims can get justice now, whether they realize it or not. Every image represents a life that has been damaged and changed, and he should receive the full force of the law, and time to suffer as a tiny portion of the suffering his part in this evil industry has caused to untold innocence. And yeah, I mean, that comment sums up exactly what I was going to say. I mean, he's blameless for this. I mean, I'm sure he still feels some sort of like blame because he's like, this guy was my best friend. I mean, you just inherently just feel so close to him and you're like, I should have done something. But at the same time, he couldn't have known. There's no way he could have known. But I just can't imagine like the betrayal he felt when he's like, you were the best man at my wedding. You were going to be my kid's uncle. You were going, like, that is just so sad. And I mean, luckily he got outed now and didn't just get away with it. Who knows if, you know, those fantasies of his could have overcame him and he could have done something, you know, to OP's kids or whatever. I don't know. That's all speculative and alleged, but, you know, who knows? It's just much better that this guy got caught now and is hopefully going to be locked up for a long, long time. Very sad post, and I can only help but feel for the OP and hope he's doing better now. I'm dying, but haven't told anyone. I was diagnosed with cancer a little over 2 weeks ago, after a regular checkup. Turns out I have a tumor on my colon that has spread to other areas, liver and lungs so far, and will require extensive chemo and surgery for any chance to live longer than 8 months. I'm not having any treatment, and I haven't told my wife because she'll only pressure me to get the treatment, which will result in months of pain and suffering for a relatively small chance of survival. Instead, I'm making sure our last few months together are filled with only happy memories. I'm starting to work later and finishing earlier in the day to make her breakfast in bed and take her on dates in the evenings. My landlord I rent my workshop from has agreed to let me run my business rent-free for the next 6 months, which means significantly less financial stress, and I can save a lot more. And now let's get into some comments. Someone says, okay, real talk here, OP. My husband's grandfather did this. Didn't tell a soul. Made his doctors agree to not mention it to his family if they were ever around. Him and his doctors called it a side effect of his COPD. His family accepted that, but it was cancer. And he was dying, maybe a year tops. My kids were with their grandmother, his daughter visited in the hospital. He was in for pneumonia, which he got quite often and always came home. Another of his daughters was there as his wife had finally gone home to take a nap. Well, he coded with my kids in the room, DNR order. His daughters are screaming because the doctors won't touch him. He's in the hospital, so they're supposed to help, right? Thank God my kids were too little to understand what was going on. He passed away with everyone in the hall watching. No warning. They thought he had come home in a few days per usual. His wife didn't even get to say goodbye. The family didn't figure anything was going on about the cancer and him having an expiration date until they demanded to know what was going on. He knew and wanted to save them the heartache. Well, his sons hadn't bothered to come visit because it was in the middle of the week and they worked, along with his hospital stays for this being very normal. They had no closure. The whole family spread his ashes over the headstone of his wife and he had made when their infant son died decades before. Very solemnly, confused, angry, and lost. Please reconsider doing this to your family. It helps no one but you. You're going to die, but your wife isn't, and will have to live with so many whys the rest of her life. You don't have to have treatment if you don't want to, but for the love of her, tell her. And I think that last paragraph the commenter said was perfect. If you love her, tell her. Because, I mean, yeah, if you're going to pass away in seven months or so, why not tell her? So 7 months from now, when you pass away, she's just wondering what the fuck happened, why you died of cancer, and you never, like, she would feel betrayed, to be honest. It's like, why didn't my husband tell me he was dying? And then she'd be just lost. And if you tell her, then, you know, then you can really cherish the last 7 months together. If you're gonna die, if you know you're gonna die in 7, 8 months, then why not tell her so you guys can, you know, drop it all, not go to work, and, you know, I don't know, spend the last 8 months doing whatever. I know that it sounded like there were some financial troubles, but still, it's like, you could really make something work if you realize this is the last 8 months I have with the person, instead of just going about it as usual. I mean, I would feel betrayed if I was the OP's wife. Like, imagine your significant other didn't tell you, and they just died keeping a secret from you, a horrible secret. And sure, you might not want to get therapy or whatever, but you don't have to. I don't know. I just, yeah, very emotional post. And the OP posted this 7 years ago, and it was on a throwaway account. We haven't heard from the OP since, so who knows if the OP passed away. But if the OP did pass away, then rest in peace, and I hope my OP's wife is doing better now. But very sad and emotional story. Yeah, wow. On to the next one. I entered a stranger's house to avoid a DUI. I live in Australia. Not sure how it works in the rest of the world, but I was on my provisional driver's license as a teenager. We call them P plates. And when you're on that, you cannot have any alcohol in your blood whatsoever. I stayed at my mate's place one night, and he had some beers to drink. I had two, knowing I had to drive the next day, and was going to stop, but he convinced me to have another, so I did. The next day, I got in my car to drive home, and as I was turning a corner, there were a couple police doing an RBT, random breath test, and I panicked. I knew full well I'd have a little bit of alcohol in me, and that's enough to lose my license for a couple months. I had just left school and gotten a really good job, and if I got a drunk driving charge, I would have to rely on my parents to drive me there, which wouldn't work out as they both had jobs. I panicked and turned right on to another street. I drove halfway down the road, thinking I'd gotten away with it, but one of the cars suddenly turned around the corner and blasted the sirens. I pulled over and the cop came to my window. And then the cop says, "Can you explain to me why you just avoided an RBT?" Instead of explaining to the cop why and just taking my punishment, I decided to lie. Me. I wasn't trying to avoid it. I live down here. Then the cop says, "Whereabouts do you live?" Just over there." "Well, you don't mind if I follow you and watch you enter your house for proof, do you?" I kind of shit myself, but agreed. He got in his car, and I drove into a driveway halfway down the street and walked up to the door. My current plan was to just explain to whoever it was at the door what's going on and hope he lets me inside. I walked up and knocked, but no one answered. Then I looked over my shoulder at the cop and turned to just open the door, and it was unlocked. I walked inside and shut the door. I was really scared for if whoever lived there was going to walk out and see me and scream, but no one did. I stayed at the door peeking out the window at the cop, and he left after about 10 minutes. I waited another 10 minutes before walking down and driving off again with a big sigh of relief. Not here to condone drunk driving or anything. I made a mistake and it was wrong. Just sharing this story. And alright guys, that wraps up some horrifying Reddit confession threads. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Today's video was heavy, man. Yeah, there was some heavy confessions in here. I mean, the drug-fueled night one was truly one of the most, honestly, like life-changing stories I've ever read. That story was insane. I just have to wish that OP the best. I hope they're doing better now. And yeah, that was just an insane confession and story and just roller coaster, man. But comment down below, what confession did you think was the most interesting? Or do you have any thoughts you want to share? Share them down below. I read every single comment and respond to a lot of them, so comment down below. And like I said in the beginning, please, follow me on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, like the video. It helps more than you know. Join the Patreon if you want early access to every single video. That helps a ton as well. And if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll enjoy other videos on my channel, so check out some other videos. I'd love to see you around in the comment sections. And yeah, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. This was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Reddit is an ocean of voices. Millions of posts are made every single month, and most disappear into the void without a trace. But sometimes, something interesting surfaces. A post so strange, so dark, or so mysterious that it spreads like a virus across the site. At first, it makes no sense. A cryptic message, a haunting image, a desperate cry for help. But the deeper you look, the more mysterious it gets. Today, we're diving into some of the darkest and most mysterious Reddit posts. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into some of Reddit's darkest mysteries. The Box of Crazy. There are some mysteries that don't start with a crime scene or a missing person. They start with an object, something that feels off the moment you touch it. What looked like an ordinary, dust-covered box sitting beside a dumpster would turn out to contain one man's descent into madness, a decades-long attempt to document something no one else could see. It all began when a Reddit user named TramStopDan made a post on the subreddit r/what is in this thing about 12 years ago. The post read, "Large box, full of odd illustrations of an event, aka the Box of Crazy, found by the trash bins." Along with this, he posted an image of the box that he found. On the outside, it looked just like a normal box, but looks to be a large artist portfolio case. Looking at the box, it's obviously really worn out, but it has these specific, simple, industrial-style toggle latches and a black composite carrying handle, which were introduced mostly in the mid-20th century. So to narrow it down, these kinds of boxes were mostly used between 1920 and 1950, so this box was really old. But what made it so special was what was on the inside. When the user opened it, he found hundreds of pages stacked on top of each other. But what made this so disturbing was that this person had drawn UFOs, extremely bizarre demonic beings, weird-looking maps, and it also contained pages after pages of writing, which almost looked like they were written by someone who was almost in a trance-like state. Within hours, thousands of people were now going through the contents of this case, trying to make sense of what it all was, because none of it actually made any sense. The drawings were really obscure, and the writings were also very abrupt, as if the person wrote them in a feverish state. After going through the contents, the Redditors managed to identify the person who had made these drawings by finding his name on one of the pages. It was made by Daniel S. Christianis, who was born in 1904 and died in 1994. The OP then gave a theory that this person was likely traumatized by the events of World War II, and that he might have actually been drafted as well, which might have led him to create these crazy pieces of artwork. There was evidence in the drawings as well, including this drawing where he had drawn a tornado. An address in the drawing and a VA medical center receipt showed that he was in fact a resident of Tampa Bay at the time. On the Imager album that the OP posted, he listed all the images one by one, and with the first image of the box he wrote, "Roughly 29 inches by 38 inches on the exterior. It smells of basements and dampness." This meant the box had been sitting there for a very long time, probably since the original creator made it. It's likely that he kept it hidden in the same cellar where he worked on his creations. As you flip through the album, you'll find this insanely detailed drawing of an anti-friction railroad bearing, and the level of precision is just crazy. It looks exactly like a patent design, which means he might have actually been trying to invent something real. There's no record of him ever filing it, but it definitely shows he was more than just an artist. He was an inventor too. Then things started to get weird. Some pages have maps of the world, but every single one of them has a hole cut right in the middle. According to the OP, it looked like he was layering them together, maybe to find a hidden location or pattern. And this is where the entire album starts to get really dark, because the further we go down, the less it looks like engineering, and the more it looks like something else entirely. Suddenly, there are drawings of UFOs, and then a humanoid creature so detailed it's almost disturbing. It has 4 wings, 4 faces, and legs that don't even look human. The OP said this part seemed to capture a specific event that completely changed him. As Daniel wrote, and I quote, now things start to get a little odd. It seems that the artist saw something in Tampa, Florida in 1977 that changed him. This appears to be an early sketch of the event, referring to the image with the UFO. Then comes a really obscure image which shows really weird humanoid creatures kneeling down almost as if they are preying on a decayed globe-like structure, and right on top of them, there's something that looks like a grand structure. The OP described it as an obvious blending of the religious and the extraterrestrial. And this is where things really start to take off. If you go through Daniel's writings, you'll actually find proof that he was a Seventh-day Adventist, a group that believes Jesus will soon return to Earth to destroy all evil, and suddenly, his bizarre designs start to make sense. Most of his drawings were clearly inspired by the Book of Ezekiel, where angels are described as gyroscopic beings, wheels within wheels. That's exactly what many of his blueprints looked like. But that's not all. There were also multiple drawings of a strange structure in Tampa Bay that kept showing up again and again. Reddit users eventually tracked it down, and it turned out to be a real building, the Inverted Pyramid Pier. Curious, people started digging even deeper into Daniel's life, hoping to decode what his sketches actually meant. In one of his entries, he showed the pier being hit by a tornado in 1977, but when users checked, no tornado ever hit Tampa Bay that year. So, what exactly was this tornado-looking thing he kept drawing? Turns out, it wasn't a tornado at all. It was a UFO, or at least, that's what he believed. Because on that same date, an artist named Rockney Krebs had hosted a laser exhibition at the pier, projecting massive glowing beams into the night sky. People assumed Daniel must have mistaken those lights for something otherworldly. But here's the strange part. After July 7th, his writings became more and more obsessed with UFOs. One Redditor even found an old magazine Daniel mentioned, Omniscience and Science Fiction, and inside there was an illustration of lenticular clouds, strange cloud formations that look like UFOs. Back then, people didn't even know what they were, and Daniel believed they were stealth shields used by alien crafts. And this is where the story spirals into pure madness. As the OP went deeper, he found something truly disturbing. Daniel wrote that Jesus was actually an extraterrestrial who would use anti-gravity technology to fly. And all the blueprints, all those machines, were meant to help Jesus return to Earth. Those strange creatures in his drawings weren't angels at all. They were flying suits for humans. Even the complex bearing designs were part of a massive invention he called the Puma Space Train, though its true purpose remains a mystery. At this point, we have to pause, because while Daniel was clearly struggling with something deep and psychological, those struggles drove him to create some of the most fascinating and intricate designs imaginable. And as a devoted Seventh-day Adventist, he believed all of it was to prepare for the end of the world. His album alone is endless. It would take hours to get through every page. But what if I told you there's even more? Yeah, after the initial discovery was made and the box of crazy made headlines on major news outlets, some new information was revealed by the original poster, Tram Stop Dan. The box of crazy was actually found way back in 2008 by a Reddit user named Dirty Gremlin, sitting right next to a dumpster in North Carolina. He immediately realized there was something special about what he just found, so instead of throwing it away, he decided to keep it safe. Years later, he shared it with one of his friends, a photographer who went by the name Tran Stop Dan. Together, they decided to finally release everything online for the world to see. After that, people went wild. A user named Funk Hayes gathered all the information, photos, and theories into one massive post. thinking this was the complete story of the Box of Crazy. Or at least, that's what everyone thought, until May of 2015, when something unbelievable happened. A Reddit user named That's My Box reached out to Funk Hayes, claiming she was the previous owner of the Box of Crazy. At first, everyone assumed it had to be fake, just another internet troll, until she shared never-before-seen fragments from the box. They weren't in the original collection, yet somehow, she had them. And this is where the mystery suddenly turns into a massive, absolutely crazy twist. Because it turns out, the woman who found the Box of Crazy had actually discovered it back in the 1990s, right after moving into a house that she bought for a suspiciously cheap price, but there was a catch. The house had once belonged to a man named Daniel S. Christines, and when she bought it, she didn't just get the property, she got all of his belongings too. Apparently, the Box of Crazy was just a small piece of Daniel's life work, not even 1/10 of it. When she first moved in, the house was cluttered, dirty, and strange. Stacks of papers, charts, and blueprints were scattered everywhere. She said there was even a weird-looking machine in his bedroom with a seat that was worn through from use. And here's the creepy part. Daniel had actually drawn that same design in his notes. According to him, the machine could be used to reach a higher plane of existence, see the future, and even communicate with otherworldly entities. He believed he could leave his body using it, and he'd even written down blueprints explaining exactly how it worked. Later, when the woman went through his papers and saw all the drawings of angels and UFOs, she thought it looked demonic. So she asked a few friends to help her get rid of everything, but apparently they didn't, because years later, when she visited one of those friends, she found one of Daniel's drawings framed in their living room. So she took everything back, every paper and sketch, but eventually lost it all while moving out. The new property owner ended up dumping the boxes near a dumpster, and that's where Dirty Gremlin found it. In the end, no one could really make sense of those drawings or the strange writings that came with them. Sure, people tried, and some, like Dan, came up with really thoughtful interpretations, but no one truly understood what was going on inside Daniel's mind. Some believe it was a form of outsider art, the kind that comes with deep trauma, when someone tries to process their pain through creativity. But honestly, it seems like Daniel might have been struggling with schizophrenia, mixed with a vivid imagination. And since he was exposed to these otherworldly ideas from such a young age, it's not hard to see how they ended up taking over his entire life. Super Heat Ran 2. Now, this next one might be a little unsettling for some viewers, so trigger warning. Violent content ahead. This whole mystery started with a user named SuperHeatRan2, who made a post on the Reddit intelligence agency, r/RBI2 subreddit, where he said, "Found this film photo at my thrift store, inside a old Kodak carousel box, and the image itself was nothing less than terrifying. It was a strip of a 35mm film, and I'm gonna have to blur it for YouTube, but it showed a blood-stained bed in the side of a wall with an undressed body between the bed and the wall. And these 35mm strips are old, but people sometimes still use them, so the only time estimation we can have of its existence and when it was taken would be anywhere from the 1970s to the current time. What makes this more terrifying is that it looks like a picture someone took right after committing a horrific murder, and it looks too real to be dismissed as an art project or fake," explaining what he did next. "Hello everyone. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I'm leaving an update as a comment. Here's what I did. When I saw the photo, I was curious and pointed into a contrast area to look at it, and my body jolted because I was so shocked. I didn't buy the Kodak carousel and just took the photo and went outside. I went to another store next door and called the non-emergency line describing what I saw and that I felt like it was a genuine photo. They told me they're sending an officer when available. She said she didn't have an ETA. The dispatch person told me if I can wait at the thrift store, and I said yes. I'm waiting in my car as of now. The post took off almost instantly, and people were hooked to find out what would happen next, but everyone was glad because at least this would now get investigated by officials. Later, he posted another update. Second update. Still on phone, sorry. The officer arrived a bit after I posted the update. Him and I looked at the photo, and basically, he was just looking thoroughly and asked me where I found it, and I just described where I found it. Then him and I walked to the thrift store and showed him the exact box I found it. He sent a photo of the film to a coworker and spoke to him on it. He then took down my information and told me that he's going to take it to the people who can properly process the image to investigate it. I basically told him how I just thought the carousel was cool, so I opened it up to see the condition, and I saw the photo and thought someone left a family photo, so I checked, and it was a definite not a family photo. I also gave him the time I found it, a minute before I took the photo. He then said if there's any more questions or things, he'll reach out to me. But he says it's unlikely since I just found the photo and don't know much about it. He then said thank you, that's all he needed, and then took the box and photo, and then began to walk to the thrift store worker to ask questions, but I left. That's all I have so far. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if I will be getting any update from them, since I'm sure it's hard to go off a film photo, and since I just stumbled upon it from chance and have no other information other than what I said. If there's anything, I'll be sure to update. Sorry for any mistakes, I wrote this in my car and my hands are a bit shaky. After that, the post started reaching more people, and while some people did think it was fake and that the OP created it to get some attention online, most people said that it was real. A user made a comment saying, I took a death investigation course in grad school, which used real death scene photos. This photo appears to be a real death scene. Though I cannot tell you if it's murder, natural, or self-induced, death naturally gets messy. The substances visible on him in the mattress don't necessarily mean it's foul play. You did the right thing calling the police. The fact that someone took a photo doesn't speak good things, regardless of the manner of death. Then, an hour later, he also posted a clearer picture of the image so that people could see it for real and identify anything that might be able to help. Then another user came in and decided to analyze the image for people who were too scared to see it, while also saying that they think the picture was, in fact, real. The user said, I feel like if it was fake, it would be either more or less gruesome. But there's something about the positioning of the body, the fact that it isn't a more attractive body type, read thin and beautiful for better optics, and the natural pattern of blood on the wall that indicates the victim fought and didn't die immediately. Visible hand/finger marks on the wall, in addition to smudges and splatter, just doesn't seem like it was some type of dark art project. Obviously, I can't say for sure, but I watch a ton of true crime and fiction crime shows. The difference in the brutality and realism of the crime scene photos are easy to distinguish. The OP then also posted a picture of the carousel that the film was in. And from what it looks like, this type of carousel was used in the 1980s, so it is safe to assume that the picture was in fact at least 40 years old. In the picture alone, there are too many signs that suggest it is real. There were a few clear signs that this was a real crime scene. Investigators noted a natural pattern of blood on the wall, along with smudges, splatters, and even visible handprints and finger marks. Experts in blood splatter analysis looked at it closely. It's a field that helps figure out what exactly happened during a violent event. From the pattern, they believe the victim had fought back and did not die right away, which showed just how detailed their analysis was. And in another comment, the OP mentioned that there was another really odd thing about the film. Usually, if you hold a 35mm film like this, they have this really smooth texture, almost like varnish. However, this film was a little different, as the OP mentioned, and I quote, "No worries about the question. I didn't smell it, but yes, it was sticky, as in it would stay on my index finger after pressing on it. This confirmed that the film was really old because a new 35mm film would have a really smooth texture, but if you leave them in a room temperature box for longer than a decade, they start to become sticky. And the fact that this stayed on his finger meant that it had been in this box for years. People started coming up with theories that whoever owned this might be a killer, who must have kept this photo as a trophy and eventually lost it over the years, and then it somehow ended up in a thrift store. Now, what makes this case so strange is that it's what people call a cold case anomaly, meaning it doesn't follow the usual pattern of how old unsolved cases are handled, because, as you guys already heard, the police actually took the photo as evidence, but after that, nothing. No updates, no statements, not even a small mention of the original image. It's like the case just vanished. Normally, when police find new evidence in a cold case, especially something involving possible remains or a crime scene, they release a public statement or ask for help, like they did with the famous Taro Calico Polaroid back in 1988, but here, the silence is total. That silence, though, might actually be intentional. In many cases, investigators hold back key details, things like the blood pattern, etc., to make sure only the real perpetrator knows them. If this slide really is genuine, it could be sensitive evidence they don't want to risk exposing. And that's why it's so puzzling. Because if it were fake, the police would have just come out and said so. The fact that they didn't might mean there's more to this than anyone realizes. And hopefully they catch the perpetrator soon, and if they do, then expect a video in the future, but for now, it's unsolved. Linda Pagano. This case starts inside a quiet college library, where a geology student named Christina Skates from Cleveland State University was digging through some old cemetery records. She was just doing her usual research when she stumbled upon one really strange entry. Now, normally, cemetery records have all the basic stuff: full name, date, maybe even some background about the person. But this one, it had none of that. In fact, it only said 3 words: white, female, bones. Christina could have just ignored it, thinking it was some old, incomplete file. But then she noticed something even weirder. Where the person's name should have been, there was just a number: woman 82483. So she reached out to the cemetery, hoping they'd know something, anything. But they didn't. Even their private records had zero information. At that point, Christina realized no one had ever come forward to claim or even identify this person, so she decided to do what any modern-day detective would do. She took the mystery online. She made a post on r/unsolved mysteries, explaining everything she had found. The post read: Cleveland suburb, 74 to 75. While researching another Cleveland mystery, I stumbled upon a cemetery index listing for unidentified female bones. A call to the cemetery confirmed that no action had been taken since her interment, and further research at a local library of newspapers on microfiche turned up a handful of articles. I have attempted to contact the city's detective, but have not had any response in months. I have not contacted the county. No resolution is found within the articles, nor in any for some years after, and possibly to this day. A search of databases such as the county and state unidentified, as well as NAM-US, has not turned up anything that I can connect to this woman. As one will see in the articles, there was quite a confusion regarding who was handling the case, and with time surpassed, I think contributed to her not being listed. If there are any questions, I will do my best to answer. Now, unlike most people, who just post a missing case online and let Reddit detectives do their thing, Christina decided she was not stopping there. She wanted answers. So she started digging deeper, going through old news archives, trying to trace the mystery all the way back to where it began. And finally, after days and days of searching, she found something. the original report. It dated all the way back to February 5th, 1975. That day, 3 teenage boys were hiking through Rocky River Reservation in Strongsville, Ohio, when they noticed something strange. Sticking out of the mud was this pale, odd-looking structure. And, being teenagers of course, they decided to just check it out. Their curiosity quickly turned into fear, because that structure wasn't just a random object. It was a skeleton, and judging by the way it looked, it had been there for a long time. Now, instead of calling for help right away, the boys actually waited almost 6 hours before they finally contacted the police. When the officers arrived, they were confused too. The bones were so worn down that they couldn't even tell if they belonged to a person or an animal. But once they uncovered the skull, the truth hit them. This was human. When Christina found this piece of history, she reached out to everyone she could. The police, hospitals, park rangers, hoping someone, somewhere, still had records about it. But every door she knocked on led nowhere. No one had any clue. Then finally, she got a break. She managed to get her hands on the original autopsy report through the local forensics department, and what she discovered was heartbreaking. The skeleton showed clear signs of trauma, and even worse, some bones were missing, including the entire jaw. The report said the remains belonged to a young woman, somewhere between 17 and 23 years old, and the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. That's when Christina's worst fear came true. This was a murder, and whoever did it made sure she could never be identified. Christina kept digging and later found out that this case had actually been ruled out to be a cold case because the police at the time said, and I quote, "We're still trying, but we've gone about as far as possible with what we have now." And that was said by the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office spokesman. For a long time, her remains just stayed inside the autopsy lab. There were a few disagreements about where she should be buried, and no one really knew what to do with her. But eventually, a decision was made. She was laid to rest in Highland View Cemetery, a place mostly reserved for people who can't be matched to any existing records, the forgotten and the unidentified. After finding all of this, Christina went back to her Reddit post and updated everything, every detail she had uncovered, along with what she plans to do next. And that's when things really started to take off. Her post began gaining traction. More people started commenting, and the mystery of white female bones suddenly became a case the entire Reddit community wanted to solve. A Reddit user named books_and_wine replied by saying, "It is really heartbreaking that most of the coverage was not focused on trying to identify her or discover what happened, S-word, murder, etc., but rather on inter-bureaucratic bickering over who had to foot the bill to bury her. That just makes me sad." The Darcy Brown case references a similar disappearance of the second wife of Darcy's murderer husband. She disappeared from Cleveland in 1973. She was 29, a little older than projected, but definitely within the range. But even with all of that effort, it still felt like a dead end. Then, one Reddit user reached out and asked if they could share her research on Web Sleuths, which was one of the biggest true crime forums at the time. Christina agreed, and once the post went up there, the case suddenly exploded with attention. Christina kept updating her original Reddit post with every small detail that surfaced from Web Sleuths, and that's when another online detective stepped in. His name was Carl Koppelman. He wrote, "Incidentally, I just spoke with Cuyahoga MedX office about this case yesterday. They had contacted me regarding the 1981 Euclid Bosca Tech John Doe, and while I had her on the phone, I asked about this case. She couldn't find anything in her records about this Jane Doe, and was totally unaware of her existence. I sent her the link to this case file that ICE 190 obtained, and the PM photos. Hopefully she can find additional info and get her into NAMUs, now that she is aware of this case." Anj Fisher from the Cuyahoga County MedX office looked in her system and discovered that she was not included with the other UID cases because the word unidentified was misspelled. But they have all the info on this case. and she's going to send what she has to the NAMUs and get a case file set up for this case. It turned out that the only reason this Jane Doe had no record, no match, and no connection to any missing persons case was because of a single typo. The word unidentified had been misspelled in the system, and since these databases are fully automated, that one tiny mistake basically erased her from existence. For over 50 years, no one could link those bones to any missing person because, in the system's eyes, she didn't exist at all. Now that the error was finally found, it was time to move toward facial reconstruction to figure out who she really was. They needed a face, something solid, to compare against old missing person photos. But just when it felt like they were getting close, another problem showed up. As Christina wrote in her post, "I've obtained the ME autopsy report. Since I was able to obtain it, I presume it's legal to put on here for research. I think a call to Barria PD in the Western Reserve Medical Center may help. I think we're screwed on facial reconstruction. The skeleton was missing quite a few bones due to scavenging of animals and possibly water current. Only 5 teeth and an unerupted number 16 wisdom tooth were present. Post-mortem loss of the others. No mandible. Report might be gruesome for some. Case number 156963, autopsy number M38363. Tell me what you make of it." However, this is where the guy I mentioned earlier, Carl, became an essential person in the case, because he had been solving these types of cases for years online. He had even done the facial reconstruction for another cold case of a woman called the Walker County Jane Doe, so he was the perfect person for this case, who had just managed to be there at the perfect time. Using his past experience in cases like these, and by using the data available on the current Jane Doe, he managed to create a sketch of what she might have looked like, and this was a massive breakthrough in the case. And this is when Carl found another lead. This newly listed missing woman from late 1974 looks like a very good possible for Strongsville Jane, Linda Pagano. Age is right, location is good, time frame is good, her listed height is a little short. He then contacted law enforcement, and they went through every record they could find, but nothing matched, which meant it was finally time to exhume the body. Working with the University of Akron, they located the exact burial spot and recovered what was left of the remains. The bones were sent for DNA analysis, while authorities turned to something called a GNE match to trace her family. It's basically an open source DNA database where investigators compare unidentified DNA to public genealogy reports, using distant family connections to slowly piece together who the person really was. The potential match? Family members of Linda Pagano voluntarily gave mouth swabs for DNA testing. Now it was time for them to wait. Months passed with no update. However, on June 29th, 2018, the identity of the bones was finally revealed. It was in fact Linda Pagano. Carl made a post saying, "Just got word from Linda Pagano's sister that Strongsville Jane Doe is in fact Linda Pagano. Although the authorities were onto the possible match before I called it in, I am flagging the thread as a WS match because, if not for the amazing sleuthing work by ICE 190, this case would still be buried deep in the police and coroner's office archives. It was only because ICE 190 decided to investigate a Jane Doe grave that was not listed anywhere. The case was listed in NAMUs and consequently was noticed by Akron PD. Congratulations, ICE 190, and great work." The case was finally solved, and woman 82483 finally had a name, Linda Pagano. But who was Linda? And more importantly, who killed her? Well, the internet detectives managed to piece together her entire story. Linda was a 17-year-old girl living a normal teenage life. On August 31st, 1974, she went missing. But according to her stepfather, Brian Claffin, that was the day they had a fight, and he kicked her out of the house. She never came back. He told the police she probably ran away, but her family did not believe that for a second. Still, the case was labeled as a runaway and quietly closed. A year later, when the bones were found, Linda's brother, Mike Pagano, actually reached out to the police, telling them the remains were discovered close to where she'd last been seen. But since the case was already closed, no one listened. And that's what makes this so tragic, because to this day, no one truly knows who killed her. The only thing we do know is that her stepfather's story never really made sense. He had a violent past, was known for losing his temper, and his timeline did not match up with what Linda's boyfriend said. So maybe, if the police had listened back then, they could have caught her killer and given Linda justice decades sooner. And alright guys, that wraps up some of Reddit's darkest mysteries. I hope you enjoyed today's video. My favorite case was the Box of Crazy. I thought it was so interesting, and I just wonder what was going on inside that guy's head. And I hope those drawings are safe, because that really is artwork. And I think it needs to be preserved, and it's very, very interesting. But all of the other cases were super interesting as well. Comment down below what you thought was the most interesting. Thank you so much for watching to the end of today's video, and please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep making videos like this, and join the Patreon for early access, uncensored videos, and the weekly Snook Show. I appreciate you guys watching. This is Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. The internet is the largest creation in human history. It connects every corner of the planet. Every thought, every obsession, every secret, all flowing through the same endless network of screens. But if you dig deep enough, you'll find corners that were never meant to be seen, pages that feel wrong, videos and pictures that shouldn't exist. Today, we're diving into those dark corners, into the cases that remain unsolved. And before we begin, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join the Patreon for early access and uncensored versions of every video, and many, many more perks. And without further ado, let's get into the internet's darkest mysteries. And before we begin, a quick warning. The following case is based on public speculation and publicly available information. Nothing discussed here has been proven, and no one mentioned should be assumed guilty of any crime. Please do not contact, harass, or investigate anyone named or shown in this piece. This content is for educational and documentary purposes only. Let's begin. The Instagram Blue Pages. In my search for news stories, I came across this Reddit post titled, "Dozens of Weird Instagram Accounts with Seemingly Random Symbols." The poster provides 5 screenshots of different accounts, each with mysterious blue artwork and drawn symbols. Shapes like 8-pointed stars, circles, spirals, squares with dots, clovers, concentric circles, and each account is following only one other account. Another user with another set of strange blue photos, with the same graphics and color schemes. This chain goes on for something like 30 accounts. Then the chain circles back. At first it seems innocuous enough, just some weird AI generated art. But one commenter, Just a Dude 3X, provided a theory. Oof, this might be steganography, and given the context how you found it, you probably should report it. Further down, Just a Dude 3X explains what steganography is. It's basically a random image, but some pixels are slightly changed in color. If you look at it, you see a normal picture, but a software can extract data out of the way the pixels are changed. There might be a different picture, or even video or audio encoded in these pictures. So, the user thinks it should be reported, but why? They seem innocent enough. If the assumption is that these images could be hiding other content, other images, what are they? Well, I began looking through the 30 accounts, and within a couple of minutes, something felt off. The images weren't AI generated. These were hand-drawn, blue spirals, circles, odd posts that blended emojis or video play buttons, on posts with no art, just a blank white background. I saw 13 likes, 20, 100, 200. And one of the most shocking profiles, named Friend de la Pau, holds a cryptic message. Reversed, that username reads La Petite Dernière, which translates to the youngest in the family. On the account Troyes_images, which translates to 3 images, there are only 3 blue images. Some strange comments written in different languages have odd or disturbing meanings when translated. In Russian, one user writes, "A whole year has flown by, and you haven't changed at all. You look great. Do you still remember me?" Another in French writes, "The girl's really sexy." Another user comments, 3 heart emojis and 2 clap emojis. But what are they commenting about? The comments don't seem consistent with the seemingly random image. Redditors started coming up with theories about the blue pages. One theory, proposed by Bored Frankie, seemed to set this mystery to rest. I'm like 99% sure that this is an experimental art exhibition being put on by an individual in Place de Fêtes by the name of Papi Camion, which translates to Grandpa Truck, who is known in Paris art scene for having a really wacky truck. I say this because, at the very bottom of the Instagram account, Marie Jean Claude, which appears to be the central account, there are a bunch of seemingly normal, at least in comparison, pictures of the truck and items inside the truck. Someone, another artist, because again, people in the art scene know him, commented on an old picture. "Papi, is it really you?" And he responded confirming that it was. He also says in the other comments that he's doing something experimental. Looking into Papi Cameron, it appears that he's just a dude with an interesting truck. He did an interview with Iodine Zine in 2015 where they write, mind you, this is all translated from French, that he was born in the 1970s and let go progressively over time of unnecessary matters, and has only kept a passport, a change of clothes, and a van. And since then, he has been navigating the world as a hermit, sort of a van life situation. Papi Caramelon's truck had been photographed numerous times, such as by this photographer under Edition, and he is widely loved in the art world. If you go on the hashtag Papi Cameron or Papi Cameron on Instagram, there are dozens of pictures of him in his truck. Many of the posts are of him and hashtags with things like urban art or exhibit, and are posted by other artists themselves. In a post under the hashtag Papi Cameron, there is a picture of him standing outside of the truck. The person who posted it is an artist / photographer / fashion designer / whatever, who said they were shooting with Papi Cameron and some models. A photographer with 40,000 followers who commented on that post in a way that insinuates to them knowing Papi also follows the Mary Claude Jean account. I found that they've legitimately done shoots together on her website too. Basically what I'm saying is that real, successful people know him and follow him on purpose. I think he's probably doing something art related, perhaps, or is unfortunately suffering from mental illness. I think the likelihood of it being something more sinister is slim. This initially brought me comfort. All of this was just an art exhibition by a popular French artist, but I still couldn't shake a bad gut feeling. So I went to the account titled Mary Claude Jean to see if I could find anything out of the ordinary. Again, more hand-drawn artwork, bright blue and cryptic. The same symbols that persist through all of the accounts were appearing here too. But this account was different. The stories on Marie Claude Jean's account were disturbing and weird. There are 4 videos. 2 of them are of a couple playing a ball game of some sort. The other 2 videos are of children, 2 girls outside of a van, as their parents unload the vehicle. After seeing these videos, I came to suspect that maybe this wasn't just an art project, and maybe their intentions could be more nefarious. Someone asked how the original poster had come across these images in the first place, and his explanation was damning. I should add context. I found creepy accounts linked with predatory behavior, and when I looked into this, I found these as well. One account has a highlight of recording children going to their car. It's disgusting. I'm thinking this is something to do with a ring of predators, but I don't know anything about it. Looks like the OP had discovered the same videos I had, and his concerns were very clear. According to their speculation, this might have something to do with people attracted to children. So, what does steganography have to do with any of this? The images that could allegedly be hidden inside these coded blue posts, well, if the theory is to be believed, then these posts might be hiding something more sinister. Something the commenters described as sexy and beautiful. Allegedly, Redditors speculate, these images could be hiding cheese pizza. And it doesn't stop at the blue page accounts. See, one commenter, DamnPlayer23, did his own research and began investigating even further. Hey, I just did a deep dive. If you got to their tag posts, there's thousands of accounts, all with thousands of posts. This is extremely disturbing and should be reported to authorities. And the commenter was correct. In my research, I found hundreds, thousands of other users, either following the blue page accounts or tagged in their posts. I began the investigation with one of the blue page accounts called Noilipap, but this account specifically had hundreds of tagged images and hundreds of followers, just like the commenter said. So I followed the trail, and what I found made me genuinely nauseous. Barbies. Now, this is all suspicious but not damning in and of itself. There are tons of art accounts on Instagram. Perhaps people have gotten a recommended white image from one of these accounts and thought, wow, what a beautiful piece of modern art. Clap emoji, heart eyes. Sure, it could all be perfectly innocent, but what if there was something else happening beneath the surface? I wanted more information. And the thousands of photos, most had very few interactions, few comments, few likes, but thousands of followers. And the comments were all suspiciously similar. The commenters used the same emojis: blue hearts, heart eyes, fire emojis, and butterflies. And they all followed Noilipap in one way or another, somewhere down the massive chain. So, what does this all mean? How do emojis do anything to confirm or dismiss the cheese pizza theory? Couldn't these just be normal art accounts? Well, this could very well be the case, and I wouldn't mention it if these weren't popular, well-known child lover symbols. The color blue, blue hearts, and butterflies, these are well-known codes that government officials and investigators are well aware of. In the past, predators have used these symbols and colors to communicate hidden messages and their tastes. One that caught my attention was the butterfly. The emoji is based on a specific species of butterfly, known as the papillon. It's famous for its striking blue and black coloring, but online, it has a secret meaning. To child lovers, it signals that the user has no preference for gender. Boys or girls are both accepted. I remembered the account that led me down the rabbit hole in the first place. The one with hundreds of tags and followers, Noilipap, well, it hit me. Noilipap backwards is papillon. Now, I will say this again. All of this could just be art accounts following one another, but all of this together is more than a little suspicious. Down the follower rabbit hole, I landed on an art account and a user going by the name Candy Bacosa. All of her posts are Barbie themed, with dolls and sets that make it look like a fashion designer's Instagram. And although the whole page is incredibly odd, this again isn't proof that there's anything weird going on. But the papillon butterfly was a prevalent symbol in her account description. And she was a frequent commenter on the Blue Pages posts. So once again, I came to suspect that even these images weren't just images, and I began to dig deeper. On her story, I found a photo of two Barbie dolls lying in the grass, skirts up, revealing their underwear. It began to remind me of another Instagram account, one more prolific, disgusting, and disturbing. Smart Schoolboy 9 was one of the most infamous and unsettling Instagram accounts ever uncovered in 2024. He was a child lover. People believed Smart Schoolboy 9 was part of a much larger problem. Similar child lover pages communicating through the supposed artistic expression, and his followers, when investigated, were often just as interested in childish fantasies. A couple of years ago, his page was taken down after mass attention and scrutiny, but even when it disappeared, copies and clones began to surface. Accounts with similar names, reposted content, and identical aesthetics. This disgusting man, sadly, had some fans. In the Blue Page accounts and the mass of followers I discovered, it felt eerily similar. And that's when I came across a comment. One that had drawn a startling comparison themselves. The user writes, recent comment on the page called account, I'm not going to read it out. A user commented, "Bro likes to diddle kids," and today responded to another user saying, for context, this guy was mutuals with Smart Schoolboy 9. It's really old speculation that they were up to no good. Welcome to the thread. An alleged connection between the Blue Pages and Smart Schoolboy 9. A known predator. But I couldn't find any recorded proof that this is true, so take it with a grain of salt. But it doesn't end there. Let's go back to the Instagram Blue Page accounts. As I was collecting screenshots from these accounts, I noticed a recurring pattern. Certain symbols were repeated over and over again. The clover, the square with dots, the circles. And I noticed that, especially on Nollipop's account, they weren't just random. They were laid out in grids. Some of them even looked like code. To me, it looked like a cryptogram. Messages written in code, and they could be seen across all of the Blue Page accounts. So I screenshotted the images and submitted them to an AI because I'm not a cryptographer, to see if the program could find some code hidden within the images. And it did. The AI determined, yes, this was in fact a substitution cryptogram. A substitution cryptogram is when letters or numbers are replaced by images or symbols. If you carefully analyze the patterns, you can determine what the coded messages are. Now, this is AI we're talking about, and this could very well be an overzealous program looking for patterns that aren't there. But the message it provided made the whole thing that much more interesting. The codex is as follows. Target, circle plus crosshair is T, plus is E, 6 petal rosette / flower is O, clover / four-lobe is S, 8-point star is A, 4 small corner dot is F, quartered circle is C, single outline square is N, stacked / overlapping squares is H, often also used as space, circle with a center dot is I, a large X is K, circle containing a small square is D, 3x3 grid square is R, plain circle is usually O, circle with diagonal slash is U. And the 4 words that allegedly repeat over and over across the account: to see, click, save. If we were to speculate for a moment, if this were truly cheese pizza, and that's a big if, how might prospective predators access the alleged photos? They'd have to get the images out of the artwork somehow, right? Well, how might they do that? Well, they'd need to buy a program, some sort of software to decode the images and pull out the real image and follow the instructions provided. When I was 16, 2 people from my high school were caught with tens of thousands of inappropriate young photos. They happened years apart from one another, and they're both in jail. One a student, the other a teacher. And I've always wondered, for years, how people get caught with so much cheese pizza. Where are they getting it from? The dark web? How are they accessing so much content without getting caught? It can't be that easy to get content like this. And especially thousands of images? How do they go years and years without getting caught? If the theory on Reddit about the blue pages is correct, then the answer would be simple. They wouldn't need to dig to get what they wanted. It wouldn't be some dark web backroom or content locked behind a password. It could be right there, on the surface web, hidden in plain sight on your Instagram feed. It's entirely possible that this could be something much, much worse than an art project. A multinational open-air marketplace for child lovers looking to buy and distribute disgusting photos and videos, and it might be happening right on Instagram, the most popular photo sharing app to date. But it's also possible that this is all just an art project. And frankly, I don't know what's true. There's just not enough information to make an actual case for either theory about the Instagram blue pages. This is all speculative. There is no actual proof, only alleged evidence and supposed connections drawn that could admittedly be wrong. Regardless, the Instagram blue pages has become one of the most weird, unsettling, and mysterious stories I've ever covered. And in all honesty, I'm the first YouTuber to cover this, and I'm very curious as to what it truly means. The 4chan murders. 4chan is an image board website modeled after the Japanese site 2chan. The site is divided into boards dedicated to different topics, ranging from anime, video games, and technology to politics, fitness, and adult content. Its B board, which serves as the random content thread, is especially notorious for shock content, trolling, and depraved media. On the 21st of August, 2015, an untitled thread was started on 4chan's random board. The user began the post with a short paragraph. "I have killed several women for pleasure. If you can guess a name, I will upload a picture. If you can guess a name of any of these women, I will upload their photo. No more than 10 names per post. Any more than that will be ignored. Some are Polaroids and others were taken with a disposable camera. I also have pictures of them before death when I was able to do so. If you guess all of the names, I will show you where I dumped a body in 1999. The first one is free, as her name is unlikely to be guessed." The user then posted an image, which showed a young woman's graduation photo, mid-20s, with curly black hair and a big smile. Next to it, a photo of a presumably dead woman, lying prone and covered in blood, with a striking resemblance to the woman in the graduation photograph, and below a handwritten timestamp on a piece of paper, provided by the user to prove its authenticity. The first photo had the date August 21st, 2005, written as the timestamp. Naturally, most users suspected this was a cruel hoax or a joke. After all, what are the odds a serial killer would post these images, possibly incriminating himself? It seemed beyond belief, and given the site's history of hoaxes and shock content, it was more likely some loser had staged the photos to get a rise out of users. But some people played along. They started to guess names, and one of them was correct. The killer replied, "Wow, off to a great start. Incredible. I fixed the timestamp. My mistake." And then with it, another photo. Another woman's body. This time, much more graphic. The corpse was completely naked, legs spread. Judging by the state of decay, she had been dead for some time. Below the photo, a corrected timestamp, reading August 21st, 2015. The exact date of posting. Shortly after, the killer shared another photo, presumably of the same victim, this time stuffed into a cardboard box, her legs sticking out from it, and her arms twisted unnaturally. This is from before I played with her. He then posted another photo of the woman before being killed. This photo was taken by the killer. She was lying in bed, smiling at the camera. Accompanying this photo was yet another photo of her corpse. Needless to say, this unsensible content was immediately flagged by 4chan. In just 20 minutes after the initial thread was created, it was taken down by moderators, and all of the original content was lost. Except for the fact that one anonymous user took screenshots. All of the photos were subject to a reverse image search, which then revealed that none of the images, not a single one, had been ever posted before. These images had not originated online. They were originals, which meant that, although they had hoped otherwise, this was no hoax. This was, in fact, a serial killer. A user asked the question, how could you get these photos developed with a disposable camera? It's required to alert the police to anything weird going on in any photo that is developed. The killer replied, I developed them. If this was true, it would mean the killer had access to a dark room, but this seemed odd. Someone in 2015 having access to a personal darkroom to develop disposable camera photos was unlikely. It wasn't impossible, but it brought up more questions than answers. Users contacted the FBI and made them aware of the thread, but in the meantime, all they could do was wait. Then, a month later, to the shock of the users invested in the case, the anonymous poster returned to 4chan. August 22nd, 2015. A picture of a nude male victim, covered in blood. The photo had a strip of white paper over it, covering the victim's eyes, presumably to hide his identity. He's presumably sitting up in bed, shielding his face, leading users to believe he was still alive when the photograph was taken, badly injured. He might have been trying to defend himself. Regardless, the caption read, "Dying, dying." And just 7 minutes later, the user posted another photo of the man. This time, the caption simply read, "Dead." He then posted an image of a man, presumably himself, wearing a red ski mask and sunglasses, pointing a shotgun at the camera. Then he wrote his final message, "I'll be back in a month to finish our game. If it is not this exact timestamp with an updated date, it is not me." Though users waited for more updates from the killer, he never posted to 4chan again, and he has not been heard from since. In the second post, behind the photograph of the man, there is another photograph of a young woman, covered in blood, wearing a black bra and tattered clothes, lying on similar white sheets to a man. Upon inspection, I have determined this is the same woman from the original post. She's wearing the same clothes as the first victim, a brown threaded shirt and dark pants. This means that not only are all of these photos original, but there are multiple photos of the victims, more than were ever posted. Now, this is a startling revelation. This was not the work of someone attempting to shock users with faux crime scene photos. If so, why not post all of the photographs? Why not show us the full breadth of the depravity? In my opinion, this was the work of someone posting individual photos, hand-curated, to play a game without getting caught. After the original post was made, news reporters contacted local police after online sleuths identified the first victim by her graduation photo. The victim was Shauna Maynard, a runaway who was shot dead in 1998. The police attributed the post to a hoax, though they would not elaborate. They stated a lack of evidence and that there was no merit to the case. Shauna's killer has never been caught, and to this day, it is an unsolved case. So, is it possible that she was killed by the 4chan user, then later dumped and shot to cover the actual cause of death? Or was Shauna a red herring, posted simply to throw the online investigation off, send them on a wild goose chase without ever revealing the actual victim? Once again, without more information, there seem to be more questions than answers. And although there have been attempts made to identify the other victims, there have been no more confirmed identifications. To this day, the true identity of the 4chan killer remains unknown. No one has ever been arrested in connection with these disturbing posts, and no law enforcement agency has confirmed whether the posts were authentic, staged, or stolen. Today, all that remains are the screenshots, grainy fragments of horrific scenes debated in late-night forums, and although users haven't given up on identifying the victims or finding the killer, there has been no ground made in a very long time. So, was it an elaborate hoax or a real serial killer who wanted to play a game? The only certainty is this: someone out there knows the truth. And if this truly was a game, since there have been no arrests made and no investigation has been announced, it looks like he's gotten away with it.